The AU Peace and Security Ambassador Bankole Adeoye has called for unity within Africa's various national legislative and continental bodies. This after Bankole raised concern on the levels of conflict on the continent. He was speaking at a joint consultative meeting between the Peace and Security Council of the African Union and the Pan-African Parliament in Johannesburg, South Africa. Held under the theme Enhancing Institutional Synergy and Collaboration for Sustainable Peace and Security in Africa, the meeting sought to strengthen the two institutions.
Unity between our organs in the AU, unity between the Pan-African Parliament and the Council will show that history can make us defeat our present challenge.
There are claims of a human rights crisis in the Republic of Congo. This comes after Les Mboiti, a Congolese political figure, historian and author, was brutally assaulted together with his wife. An activist and member of Amnesty International, Juro Loemba, says Mboiti has been released by the government after pressure.
So right now he is in an Eden place. So we are actually doing everything in order to have him evacuated outside of Congo-Brazzaville. Because despite the fact that he has been released, the Minister of Communication never actually, while he addressed this issue, he never showed any form of empathy. Because he's supposed to represent the entire nation and every citizen. Until now, they haven't taken any action. They haven't approached his wife. They haven't launched any investigation in order to find out what really happened. And that's simply because they know that they are behind what happened. And that's the sad truth.
The Progressive Forces of South Africa says it will thoroughly engage with the Lungu family on its main reasons why the former Zambian President Edgar Lungu should be buried in South Africa. The forces held an urgent media briefing yesterday at the Gallagher Convention Centre in Midrand. The briefing addressed the concerning circumstances surrounding the late former Zambian president, including the details of his stay and death in South Africa, as well as the broader legal diplomatic implications. National Organizer for Progressive Forces of South Africa, Bonang Sipulwane, explains.
As Progressive Forces of South Africa, we have decided that we will take the responsibility and dig in the issue of why Edgar Lungu family want to bury him in the country. We had a space, I believe, on the 18th of June after the family announced that they are not going to take his remains to Zambia.
Malawi's Ministry of Justice has filed papers before the High Court in Lilongwe opposing a review application launched by self-proclaimed prophet Shepherd Bushiri and his wife Mary against their extradition to South Africa. The couple is challenging a ruling by the Chief Residence Magistrate in Lilongwe in March this year that ordered that they be surrendered to South Africa. A correspondent in Malawi, George Mango, details the reasons the Bushiris don't want to be extradited to South Africa.
For the Bushiris, through their lawyer Wapona Kita, assenting to the fact that they feel that the security of their client, the Bushiris, will not be safe, and they also want that the witnesses that have, pointed fingers at the Bushiris, that they committed those crimes, have to avail themselves in the court of law here in Malawi for security reasons, and they don't want it to be virtually conducted.
Lastly, today is Nelson Mandela International Day. The initiative is global celebration to honor the life and legacy of the late former South African president. The day is celebrated every year on July the 18th, which is Mandela's birthday. The United Nations had officially declared the day in November 2009. The first UN Mandela Day was held on July the 18th, 2010. The global community will honor the legacy and values of Madiba through volunteering and community service. For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective. And coming up in your sports news, Samoa Ruth Kepchetich, the women's marathon record holder, has been provisionally suspended by the Athletics Integrity Unit for ingesting a banned substance, while the WAFCON quarterfinals officially get underway tonight in Morocco. Details of these and other stories coming up at 6:30.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
So what we do as well, weekdays, Mondays to Fridays, after the 6 o'clock news, we give you a roundup of stories making headlines in and around our continent that you may have missed and you need to get up to date with, as well as what you could expect to unravel in terms of developments in news in this new day. So today we start with a deadly drone attack on a Malian military base near the Burkina Faso border, which has renewed fears of Al-Qaeda's expanding presence in West Africa. Militants linked to the JIM group struck the Bolkesi base, catching recently deployed soldiers off guard and highlighting the region's vulnerable security situation.
This June 1st assault on Mali's military base was one of more than a dozen deadly assaults in the region by Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, or JNIM, in May and June. Data shows more than 850 people were killed in May alone. The experts say the mounting attacks reflect a strategic shift by the group, from rural guerrilla tactics towards the control of urban centres and assertion of political dominance in the Sahel region. So who are these insurgents? JNIM is a coalition of Islamist groups formed in 2017. It's led by Iyad Ag-Ghali, who has pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda. He's a veteran Malian Tuareg militant wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity. His goal, analysts say, is to impose Islamic rule across the Sahel and extend influence into coastal West Africa.
France has officially handed over its last major military base in Senegal, drawing a curtain on decades of military presence in the West African country. The withdrawal follows President Bassirou Diomaye Faye's push for greater sovereignty and the removal of all foreign forces from Senegalese soil.
The commander of French forces in Africa, General Pascal Iani, handed over a key to the military camp in Dakar.
This change is necessary. We need to reinvent our partnerships in a dynamic Africa where youth carry much hope. This requires a true transformation of our approach towards African countries and our African partners. We must act differently, and we no longer need permanent bases for this. Artificially extending our presence where it is no longer wanted by the beneficiaries would be bad policy.
The key was received by General Mbaye Cissé, head of the Senegalese Armed Forces General Staff.
J'ai espoir.
He said the new agreement would allow Senegal to continue benefiting from training and information exchanges.
Sera le ferment d'une coopération forte et vivante.
South Africa has called on G20 nations to demonstrate global and united leadership in addressing key challenges, including the rise in trade barriers. The appeal comes as G20 finance ministers meet in Durban amid renewed tariff threats from former U.S. President Donald Trump. South Africa's finance minister, Enoch Godongwana, shares more from the G20 finance track discussions.
We meet at a time of a fragile global economic growth. While inflation is gradually moderating and financial conditions have started to stabilize in some regions, uncertainty continues to weigh heavily on global growth prospects. Rising trade barriers, persistent global imbalances, and new geopolitical risks are significant concerns. In the face of these complex challenges, the G20 must remain a source of strategic global leadership, cooperation and action.
Border officials from Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania have gathered in Uganda for a regional meeting focused on tackling cross-border crime on Lake Victoria. Uganda's Minister of State for Internal Affairs, General David Mohozi, opened the talks, calling for stronger regional coordination. Sanusi Savage from the IOM shares more.
We live in the region where borders can porous where security threats evolve quickly, and where almost each day criminal networks grow more than sophisticated. Yet, amidst these challenges, we have a powerful advantage: our ability to act together. This is precisely why the regional working group exists.
Zambia's government is ramping up efforts to formalize the artisanal mining sector. Mines and Minerals Development Minister Paul Kabuswe says authorities are working diligently to introduce order and proper regulation in the often informal and unregulated industry.
Zambia has mining engineers. Yes, Zambia has electrical engineers. Zambia has technicians, artisans. But they cannot work in confusion and in illegality. And that's why we said we have to control what is happening in Mfumbwe. We are not resting, we are working out strategies. And I gave examples of the fact that the way you mine alluvial gold and the way you mine gold in ore are two different things. Alluvial is pick and shovel. Dig, 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 dig. Gold in ore, you have to define the resource. You have to do the drilling. You have to map. Do the science of mining.
That's how we come to the end of today's Rise and Shines Africa Roundup. We'll give you more stories next week on Monday, and we'll be continuing with our coverage on news in and around our continent. So stay with us.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel África. Adivinha só, a Channel África quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel África está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
This Mandela Month, we honor his belief that education is the most powerful weapon to change the world.
Education is one of the most important weapons in a country.
Catch us on DSTV Bouquet 802. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
15 minutes past 6 Central African time it is. Let's go to this story now, where the head of the AU Peace and Security, Ambassador Bankole Adeoye, says all African regions are facing huge security challenges. He was speaking at a joint consultative meeting between the Peace and Security Council of the African Union and the Pan-African Parliament in Johannesburg, South Africa. The meeting seeks to strengthen collaboration between the two institutions. Tlantla Mahlangu has more.
The Pan-African Parliament and the African Union's Peace and Security Council commenced a two-day joint consultative meeting aimed at strengthening collaboration between the two institutions. Themed enhancing institutional synergy and collaboration for sustainable peace and security in Africa, the meeting has brought together key stakeholders from both organs of the African Union to deepen mutual cooperation and operational alignment. The head of the AU Peace and Security, Ambassador Bankole Adeoye, says Africa is facing huge continental geopolitical shifts.
Some of them are beyond our continent. It is necessary to realize that as we address these challenges, we have to be forthright. Great power rivalry is happening in our backyard, unfortunately. External interference has never been higher in many of our conflicts. Our major partners are shifting from support to humanitarian relief to the highest defense spending in history.
our resources are dwindling because partners are shifting. Yeah. Indeed, some have said a trade war is brewing because of tariffs and counter tariffs. We cannot simply sit by and watch our continent suffer. In our very own continent, we are facing terrorism, violent extremism. Indeed, many have said that Africa has become, with ignominy, the capital of terrorists globally.
Ambassador Pankole also spoke about the situation in Sudan, where fighting continues to rage between the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese army. He says the continent cannot let the country collapse.
We have come up with political dialogue processes where we've held 3 rounds. We have engaged the civil society, women and youth recently in Kampala. But all this have not stopped the war. The most significant thing in Sudan, and Mr. President and honorable members of parliament, because the Peace and Security Council know most of the issues. So I will direct my emphasis to you. Raise your voices for the war to stop. It's a senseless, unjustified war. It's a war that was started because of political transition. It has become a tragedy. 12 million people displaced in Sudan. And the history of Sudan is at the center of the African history. We cannot let that country collapse. So I'm appealing to you, raise your voice as members of parliament to join in making sure that Sudan survives. It cannot be balkanized.
President of the Pan-African Parliament, Chief Fortune Charumbira, says it's now more than crucial for the two institutions to work together to tackle challenges faced by the continent.
We have no choice but to ensure that we do work together. Supposed to get together because PAP without the commissions is incomplete. The commissions without PAP are incomplete. That's the architecture of governance. The governance architecture in a state, at national, or even at district level, always compels us that there shall be the executive arm policy and implementation. There shall be the legislative, representative, oversight functions, and there shall be a judicial side of everything. When you operate without the other, you are shortchanging the citizens. And possibly the issue of democratic legitimacy. Democratic legitimacy is important. That we may have experts, we may have fundis in an area, but if they work in exclusion of citizens, they are shortchanging the citizens.
The meeting is expected to sharpen the tools of both PEP and the PSC in implementing effective peace and security interventions. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Tlandla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Nigerian billionaire businessman Aliko Dangote is seeking approval to develop a new seaport in Olokola, Ogun State, and that's located about 100 kilometers from his fertilizer and oil refinery complex in Lagos. Now, the proposed Atlantic seaport would boost export capacity and ease logistics, complementing the on-site jetty that he currently uses to ship urea and receive heavy equipment for the refinery. Channel Africa business reporter Innocent Samosa has the details.
Aliko Dangote is planning to export liquefied gas from Lagos, a project that includes building pipelines from Nigeria's oil-rich Niger Delta. Once completed, the proposed port is expected to integrate the Dangote's group logistics and export operations, positioning it as a strong competitor to existing facilities in Lagos, including the Chinese-funded Lekki Deep Sea Port, which opened in 2023. Economic analyst Progress Pulse highlights the strategic advantages of the Olokola location, particularly in terms of improved logistics, efficiency, and potential cost savings.
Strategic advantages of the seaport location in Atlantic corridor include quite a number of reasons. For example, building a seaport near Dangote's existing fertilizer and oil refinery plants, it brings significant logistics and cost-efficient benefits such as integrated supply chain efficiency. The close proximity of the seaport to the refinery and fertilizer plant minimizes inland transportation. Crude oil imports and chemical exports can be offloaded or loaded directly at the port, cutting down turnaround time and logistic costs. Export getaway. Nigeria's current port infrastructure is congested, especially in Apapa. A private seaport here gives Dangote Group a dedicated export channel, improving reliability and delivery timelines for international clients.
Pulse Prims says that it is a strategic trade location.
Also, strategic trade positioning. Located on the Atlantic coast, the port offers access to both West African regional markets and global shipping routes, a major plus for transshipment and regional trade. Then, of course, job creation and economic zones. So this project will likely spur industrial clusters around the port. This includes warehousing, processing plants, export zones, creating thousands of jobs and bolstering Nigeria's non-oil GDP, which is something that is very, very important for Nigeria.
But what are the potential risks or challenges that could delay or hinder the successful completion and operation of the Ologola Atlantic Seaport?
You're looking at the risks and the challenges that could delay or hinder this seaport. So while the project is great promise, it also faces several risks. One of them is the regulatory risks. Delays in obtaining construction and environmental permits from federal and state authorities could stall progress, particularly in Nigeria. Then there are environmental concerns. In this case, you might have coastal erosion and marine life. You're looking at the coastline that is ecologically sensitive, so activists or environmental agencies could raise objections if environmental impact assessments show threats to marine ecosystem or erosion risks. Then there are pollution risks. Remember, Nigeria, particularly Lagos, is a lagoon, which is essentially waterlogged.
The port marks the billionaire's return to the same site where he had previously abandoned plans to build his giant refinery and fertilizer complex after wrangling with local authorities. The tension has since been mended under a new administration. For Channel Africa News, I am Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
From South Africa, a groundbreaking youth exchange program is using the ocean to reconnect African and African American youth with their shared history. In Sodwana Bay, the Nature, Environment and Wildlife Filmmakers, or NEWF, in partnership with US-based organization Diving with a Purpose, has launched the 2025 edition of YICAP, the Youth International Cultural Awareness Program. Our reporter Lebogang Mabange has the story.
In the coastal waters of Sodwana Bay, young people are learning more than just how to dive. They are uncovering a deeper connection to the past. The Youth International Cultural Awareness Program, or YCAP, is a collaboration between South Africa's Nature, Environment and Wildlife Filmmakers and the U.S. organization Diving with a Purpose. Now in its second year, the program brings together 20 black youth, 10 from the United States and 10 from the local community for an immersive cultural, historical and environmental exchange. Pragna Pasotam-Kork is the co-founder of NEWF.
This YCAP program is something that's put in place to address the needs of children from the age of 12, 13 to about 20 before they reach adulthood. The intention there is to create a youth exchange focused on cultural exchanges. It only seemed fitting that, post the 2024 Youth DW Exchange, that this year he brought even younger youth for a specific cultural exchange program to Ekaya in Sodwana Bay.
Over a 10-day period, participants engage in storytelling workshops, maritime archaeology training, and conservation efforts. Pasotam Kork says it's a holistic program aimed at building skills, identity, and historical awareness.
Through this YCAP cultural awareness program that just took place at Ekaya, there were 10 youth from the United States, 10 African American youth from the United States, and 10 local youth from the Sodwana Bay community. In these 10 days, they exchanged music, their histories, their personal stories. They exchanged skills on storytelling, where they sat together and explored what it means to tell a story. How do you tell a story? And through NUF, we were able to provide navigations in areas around this. How do you build a story? How do you craft a story? What is that? What is the story you want to tell?
One of the cornerstones of the exchange is maritime archaeology, specifically the documentation of shipwrecks linked to the transatlantic slave trade. She further explains that through simulated dive exercises and mapping techniques, youth participants are trained in methods used to uncover lost slave ships.
It went from storytelling to maritime archaeology, classroom experiences which they practice on the ground. How do you map a shipwreck? How do you understand what is going on in the shipwreck? Obviously, all this reconnecting to what DWP does in uncovering the slave shipwrecks of the transatlantic slave trade. And in addition to that, they also learned about coral restoration and the importance of coral restoration. So really bringing in storytelling, history, memory, ancestry through the maritime archaeology, and the importance of conserving our oceans today through really understanding coral restoration and the importance of our oceans.
For NEWF, the goal is not only to develop the next generation of storytellers and conservationists, but also to reclaim historical memory.
Maritime archaeology is really important in reclaiming African heritage because my partner, the fellow executive director and co-founder of NUF, always likes to say that those that lost their lives during the transatlantic slave trade, in that middle passage, they died as Africans. Those are African bodies that were lost in the middle of the ocean. They didn't have the chance to reach the Americas, to become African American. And so it is so important that us here as Africans, we understand our African history because it is so interlinked and connected with that transatlantic slave trade.
In a world where identity and history are often fragmented, the YCAP program is building bridges not just between continents but between past and future. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
6:30 Central African Time it is. Let's get our news headlines. Here's Onele Nzinzi. Don't know what's going on in that studio today.
He was one man, but his spirit moved nations.
The time for the healing of the wounds has come.
Today, on Mandela Day, we celebrate the unity, resilience, and the hope that Nelson Mandela stood for. From Soweto to Dakar, Rwanda to Liberia. Tune in for special features, interviews, and stories that echo the heartbeat of the continent. Inspired by Madiba, because his story lives in all of us. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you that you chose to care.
SABC News. Headlines. The African perspective.
Looking at your headlines this morning, the Umkhonto Wesizwe Party in South Africa will march to the union buildings in Pretoria this morning. The party's Deputy President John Hlophe will lead the total shutdown march, whose aim is to demonstrate the MK's party's support for the KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. The head of the AU Peace and Security Ambassador Bankole Adeoye has called for unity within Africa's various national, legislative and continental bodies. This after Bankole raised concern on the levels of conflict on the continent. And civil society organization the Swaziland Solidarity Network has expressed outrage over the arrival of 5 foreign criminal deportees from the United States in Eswatini. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And it's time now to find out what's been happening in the world of sport. I know there's lots of football taking place across the continent and also in Europe. And giving us details of all the sport, especially what we can look forward to this weekend, we say good morning to Musibudi, Rachel Makura. Good morning.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. A very good morning from the sports desk. We'll start with the story that broke overnight. So Ruth Kepchetich, the women's marathon world record holder, has been provisionally suspended by the Athletics Integrity Unit for a banned substance. Now, the Duritec hydrothorazide HCTC was detected in a sample collected from Kenyan on the 14th of March of this year, according to the ARU statement. Now, the 30-year-old broke the world record to win the Chicago Marathon in October of 2024, clocking a time of 2 hours, 9 minutes and 56 seconds. Now, HCTS is used clinically to treat fluid retention as well as hypertension and is a prohibited substance at all times under the World Anti-Doping Agency WADA code. Now, the Kenyan's time in Chicago surpassed Ethiopia's Tisged Asafa's previous record that was set at the 2023 Berlin Marathon by nearly 2 minutes. Now, the Kenyan was not provisionally suspended by the ARU at the time of notification. That was on the 16th of April of this year. However, on the 19th of April, she opted for a voluntary provisional suspension while the ARU's investigation was ongoing. On to some rugby news now. Rugby World Cup holders, the Springboks, are in the Lowveld, having caused a stir in world rugby yet again after their innovative performance in the second test against Italy this past weekend. So both Gwacha Smith as well as Curdley Aronsa have cautioned against underestimating the opponents, Georgia, this weekend. The Bear maintain that the Boks' creativity stems from a win at all cost mentality and not because they think less on the opposition. There are locks playing as loose playing as forwards, like Gwacha Smith, who could potentially play 3 different positions. Now, Smith also says that while players can cut their teeth in new roles against the likes of Georgia, it is also the alignment camps where they plan how to cover all their bases.
I think for us, as players that's filling more than one role, more than one position, filling 3 positions in a game, it's not almost in that week where you get the preparation, it's almost in the camps. When we have camps before we start going into test weeks where you get that preparation, and that's really important because when you go into test week you want to focus on your main position. Say if it's, for me instance, it's maybe 6 and 8 or whatever, I want to focus on that, but then I've done the work to maybe cover wing in the camps.
Now, the Boks know that Georgia will be physical and that their players will also be looking to impress on Saturday. A good performance against the 2-time defending world champions could be life-changing for some of these players, according to Smith.
They're one team that never steps back. I mean, it doesn't matter what the scoreboard is, those guys will keep on fighting, keep on playing. Because for them it's also important, they want to measure themselves against us and against the Springboks because that might give them an opportunity to get a contract in France or wherever in the world. So it's a huge opportunity for them also to prove themselves against the best, and that might open their career forward.
Right, so kickoff is at 5 p.m. Central African time on Saturday at the Mbombela Stadium in South Africa's Mpumalanga province. We'll stay with rugby news. So the junior Springbok head coach Kevin Foot says the team's resilience in tough conditions has boosted their confidence ahead of Saturday's World Rugby Under-20 Championship final against their nemesis New Zealand. Now the junior Boks overcame Argentina 48-24 in the semi-final earlier on this week, and Foot believes that heat as well as humidity have forged a batter-hardened group ready for the ultimate test.
It's our leadership group that sets the tone, and it's just the whole group in general. If I'm honest, I think they're such a humble group. They just want to play so hard for the country. We know how hard we've worked building into this World Cup and just what it'll mean to all of us, and you know, the Springbok rugby and for our country. So I've never ever had an issue with any of our players around not staying grounded. They're a very humble bunch, and they're all desperate to do well come Saturday.
And finally, in tennis news, Ons Jabeur is taking a step back from tennis for her own well-being. The WTA announced on Thursday the Tunisian has withdrawn from the forthcoming Montreal Open, as well as added the 30-year-old was the only player in the top 99 to not have entered next month's US Open. Jabeur has been as high as number 2 in the world rankings, but has now dropped to 71st in the world. A two-time Wimbledon runner-up, she retired from her first round match at the All England club just last month as she struggled on the tournament's hottest ever opening day. It's 6:37 a.m. Central African time. That concludes your sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, simply send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makure.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126. And we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am, you know.
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views. Share your opinion. Engage with a community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's find out about the Global Environment Facility planning a new wave of wildlife conservation bonds to help some African countries. And that's part of our economics news as we get the first update of business news with Buntle Hedbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. In our top story, as you mentioned, the world's oldest multilateral climate fund, the Global Environment Facility, is planning a new wave of wildlife conservation bonds in a bid to help African countries save endangered species and ecosystems. Wildlife bonds, which provide low-cost funding in return for cutting poaching or other measures, were pioneered in 2022 with a World Bank-backed Rhino Bond. Head of Programming at GEF, Fred Bolt, says the fund aims to do these bonds for every one of the 54 African countries. He said this move would require an investment of $150 million from GEF, which would then be leveraged 10 times to provide a total of $1.5 billion for conservation efforts through other borrowing. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has confirmed that he received a letter from US President Donald Trump informing him about the decision to impose the 30% tariffs on South African products exported to the US. The tariff hikes are expected to come to effect next month. The president revealed this during the tabling of the budget vote of the presidency yesterday in Parliament. Ramaphosa has conceded that the US decision is going to significantly impact South Africa's economy in exported products. He says the impact is already being felt by some of the companies, with their export volumes starting to decline.
Last week, we received notification in a letter from President Trump to myself that exports from South Africa to the United States will attract tariffs of up to 30% from the 1st of August 2025. This could have a substantial impact on the products that we export to the United States. We have already seen how just the mere news of the intention to impose tariffs has dampened the ability of a number of exporters from our country to the United States, and we've seen how some companies have had their exports declining by up to 80%.
Financial services group Old Mutual says it sees some opportunities for South Africa despite the somewhat bleak outlook for global economic growth and inflation. The group hosted a mid-year economic update webinar focusing on the impact of potential US tariffs, the Government of National Unity and South Africa's G20 presidency. Domestically, the focus was the GNU, which political analyst Prince Mashele described as a grouping of political enemies pulling in different directions. Mashele suggested that individual deployees of the ANC have intensified looting as they sense the party's gradual decline and inevitable exit.
So the whole saga of Senzo Mchunu working with criminals is about politicians of the ANC working with criminals to steal money from the state. So that is the bigger picture. To summarize,
Ghana's central bank convened an emergency meeting of its Monetary Policy Committee yesterday to assess the recent economic developments. The Bank of Ghana's fourth rate-setting MPC meeting for the year had initially been scheduled to start on the 28th of July, with the rate decision expected on the 30th of July. The Bank of Ghana last held a scheduled MPC meeting in May, where it opted to maintain the policy rate at 28%, maintaining its tight monetary policy as inflationary pressures continue to ease due to exchange rate stability and fiscal consolidation. The outcome of the meeting, including any policy decisions, will be announced today. The board of Meta have agreed to settle a lawsuit brought by shareholders who accused directors of costing the tech firm billions of dollars by failing to prevent alleged privacy violations. The BBC's Lily Jamali has the details.
We have been able to confirm the settlement, but we don't know the amount and the details are pretty sparse at this point. I do want to be clear about one thing, though, that it was not Meta, the company, that is settling. They're not a direct party to this suit. What was really interesting about this case is that these shareholders suing were going after individuals in their personal capacity, personal liability for people like Mark Zuckerberg and past and current members of the board of directors.
And now for our first look at the financial indicators, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,528 naira. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 29. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 40. In Zambia, it's 23 kwacha 14. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 56. Russia, 78 rubles 11. India, it's 85 rupees 99. China, 7 yuan 17. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 85 cents this morning. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,336 per ounce and platinum at $1,461 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil at this hour is at $69.51 a barrel. And those are your business news. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Bundle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Now, the G20 fact for today is this one. The G20 was originally a meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors, not world leaders. And so when it was established in 1999 after the Asian financial crisis, the G20 focused purely on economic and financial policy coordination. And it only evolved into a leaders summit in 2008 in response to the global financial crisis, when the urgency for coordinated global leadership prompted heads of state to take the reins. And this shift marked a major turning point on how global economic governance was managed from then on. So, whilst many now associate the G20 with powerful presidents and prime ministers, it actually began as a more technical and behind-the-scenes economic forum. And that's our G20 fact for this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
The South African Broadcasting Corporation, the SABC Sports, brings you Chasing the Sun, a powerful 5-part documentary series about the country's national rugby team, the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Starting 13 July at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2, tune in every Sunday for the highs, the heartache, and the heroes that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus anytime, anywhere, no subscription needed. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Now, as the country marks Mandela Day today, South Africans from all walks of life are stepping up to dedicate 67 minutes to making a difference. But for many NGOs, non-governmental organizations working on the ground every day, like Oasis Haven in Johannesburg, this moment is more than symbolic. It's an opportunity to turn short-term gestures into sustainable support. Whilst blankets, food and volunteer time are always appreciated, organizations like Oasis Haven say that what's often overlooked is core funding, the very lifeblood that keeps their doors open. Well, joining us to unpack how this Mandela Day can be made more meaningful is Kodani Chuma, who's a fundraiser at Oasis Haven, a child and youth care center that supports children without parental care. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, Kodani, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning to the listeners on this inspiring day.
Tell us a little bit more about Oasis Haven, what you do and why the work that you do is so important.
So Oasis Haven is a child and youth care center. We care for orphaned and vulnerable children, providing them with tailored education, therapy, as well as medical care, just to reverse the effects of the trauma they've experienced in their very short lives at that point. We put a specific focus on education, trying to, ensure that by the time they age out of the system, that they can be able to become, responsible members of society as well.
So typically on Mandela Day, what happens at Oasis Haven?
In the past or currently?
In the past, and then I guess, because what we're trying to do is maybe shift things a little bit, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, so typically in the past, we'd get a lot of phone calls about, doing what we would call feel-good activities. So painting walls and maybe cleaning the garden, which are all important things to us, of course. We really appreciate it. But at the end of the day, what we've also identified is that without us meeting our other needs and costs that we are obligated to pay, we then are left in a bit of a ditch. So as much as painting the walls is great, it's also good to find out what are the challenges an organization might be facing, just so that you can align better with their mission.
So tell us a little bit about those challenges. Is it just funding or there's more?
Well, there's always a lot more, but the biggest challenge will always be funding for an MPO because all the operations function through us having funding, right? So in order for us to take care of the children and to send them to school and to pay for their medical expenses, we need to have money in the bank, as well as, you know, the children have caregivers who are qualified. They have their own families as well, and it's important that they are fairly remunerated. So, you know, funding for us is probably the big sticking point, if I could say it that way.
So your appeal on this Mandela Day, I mean, what would you say to people, corporates in particular, who are out there and they're thinking, we've got our staff, we want to get out there. I suppose you want the hands on deck, but also financial support.
Yes. So hands on deck, definitely. But also take the time to do some due diligence, speak to the people who run the organization, find out what their challenges are, see in what other ways you can help. As much as the practical help is great, there's also something to be said about supporting organizations financially, which can help them move forward in a more sustainable way.
Talking about sustainability, would you prefer that some of these helps that they give was throughout the year rather than just one day a year?
100%. Consistent giving is probably the most important way you can give back. By giving once off, of course, it's a big help to whatever MPO you're giving to. But by doing it consistently, you allow them to plan for the future. You allow them, it helps with financial planning going forward. And by doing so over a long period of time, you're able to scale your impact and it becomes a lot more meaningful, I believe.
Have there been Mandela Days in the past that have had a significant impact beyond one day for you?
Yes, quite a few actually. Last year was quite a good Mandela Day for us. We actually embarked on this journey last year of taking the stance of being an organization that actually tries to educate its donors and the public as to how to do Mandela Day well. So this year we're still on the same mission, and I guess we will continue to do so for the foreseeable future.
I guess it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because these costs that you talk about are unseen, you know, electricity, staff salaries, therapy, and that kind of thing. And to change that mindset of saying, look, Madiba says it's our works, it's our hands, that kind of thing. Has it been difficult to do that mind shift?
It has been difficult in some instances, and I think it's because we are not broadening our message. Hence why I'm here today to try and spread that message a bit wider. But in saying that, I have to admit that some NPOs have also misused funds before, and that has created a bit of a rift, a bit of distrust between NPOs, corporates, and maybe even individuals in some instances. And so the work that needs to be done is around rebuilding these bridges and ensuring that there can be transparency across the board and that both donor and organization can meet halfway.
Do you have a specific campaign this year or an initiative for Oasis Haven running for Mandela Day this year?
Yes, we do. So aside from having a few companies that are coming to our homes to do some work, which involves cleaning the gardens and a bit of painting, we are also asking the public to support our Sponsor a Child program, which you can find on our website, to also give towards our City of Johannesburg bills, which are currently sitting at about 50,000 Rand a month, which is quite surmountable for us. But any contributions towards that would be amazing, as well as supporting our children through school. As I said in the beginning, supporting the children's education is the biggest gift for us, so that we can give them. So any contributions towards their education would really change the trajectory of their lives. And then a last one would be for companies to consider doing some internal fundraising as employees or departments, and then selecting an MPO to support through those funds.
How long has Oasis Haven been running?
So Oasis Haven has been running for 25 years. This is actually our 25th year running. It's been an interesting time, to say the least, very challenging, but we are grateful and blessed that we have a community around us that has supported us through thick and thin, and that's the reason why our doors are still open today.
And the reason I've asked is that given that you've been open for so long, a lot of children have come through your haven. Tell us about the difference that it makes on their lives and what some of these children have gone on to become, having had this chance to be taken care of by Oasis Haven.
So I'll give you a simple example. We had a child who came into our care who was found abandoned in a public toilet. And this child stayed with us, and because we advocate for adoption, this child eventually got adopted and has moved to the US and is currently doing his university studies. And he sent us a Facebook message basically stating that his time with us meant a lot to him and that it's the reason why he's been able to have the life he has currently. And that's what we see ourselves as almost a transit or a bridging point for these children to transition into a better life for themselves. So we have very, very beautiful stories of success and children whose lives have completely been changed. For instance, going from being found in a bathroom to now living in the US is two different worlds, if I can say it that way.
Yeah, that is wonderful, because I think sometimes we forget that the impact, it can be actually generational, because this child now can impact so many people in and around his life. Perhaps in the final minute, what message would you like to send out to individuals, corporates, South Africans in general, about Mandela Day and maybe some of the ways that we need to think about this day?
So the message I would like to send is that go out there, seek to make a difference in the lives of those who are less fortunate. However, it requires us to listen and actually pay attention to the important points, less of putting our own views and our own thoughts onto what is help, and paying attention to what people actually need and aligning with that.
My dear brother, Kodani, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much indeed for the work that you and your team are doing at Oasis Haven, and I hope that it gets the kind of support that it really needs. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for having me this morning.
That was Kodani Chuma, fundraiser at Oasis Haven, talking to us about the work that they do at the Youth Care Centre on this Mandela Day and beyond.
All right, we're getting to the next hour of Africa Rise and Shine. It's 7 o'clock Central African Time. Welcome if you've just joined us, and if you had stayed with us since 6, thank you for doing just that. At Channel Africa 1 is our handle across the social media platforms. That's where you can find us. Also on YouTube, we are live streaming. SABC Plus, the app, is where you can connect with us, as well as www.channelafrica.co.za. I'm Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Thank you, as Asanda was saying, for joining us for this second hour. And what are we looking at this hour, actually? Well, the Kingdom of Eswatini is facing backlash for accepting 5 non-African deportees from the United States under a contentious policy of relocating migrants to third countries. Remember, the UK came under fire as a result of that. And in the end, they had to drop that program. Rwanda also faced some criticism. We take a closer look at this story, what might be behind it. So all of that still to come in this hour. But first, here's your news with Onere Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Umkhonto weSizwe party in South Africa will march to the union buildings in Pretoria this morning. The party's deputy president, John Hlophe, will lead the total shutdown march, whose aim is to demonstrate the MK party's support for KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. This follows Mkhwanazi's allegations that senior police officials, including Minister Senzo Mchunu, are corrupt and have links to criminal syndicates. The march is the second the MK party is embarking on in the Gauteng province this week, as it intensifies its support for Mkhwanazi. Sibahle Mota reports.
Umkhonto weSizwe party says this morning's march will form part of a series of events that the MKP in Gauteng will embark on. The MKP says today's march is part of its revolutionary duty to save South Africa. The party's position follows explosive revelations made by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, who claims that Police Minister Senzo Mchunu is associated with notorious criminals who have infiltrated law enforcement agencies. The MKP says these claims support the party's long-held belief that the ANC of Ramaphosa is not only serving its white masters, but its criminal friends at the expense of citizens.
The head of the AU Peace and Security Ambassador, Bankole Adeoye, has called for unity within Africa's various national legislative and continental bodies. This after Bankole raised concerns over the level of conflict on the continent. He was speaking at a joint consultative meeting between the Peace and Security Council of the African Union and the Pan-African Parliament in Johannesburg, South Africa. Held under the theme Enhancing Institutional Synergy and Collaboration for Sustainable Peace and Security in Africa, the meeting seeks to strengthen the two institutions. The Progressive Forces of South Africa says it will thoroughly engage with the Lungu family on its main reasons why the former Zambian President Edgar Lungu should be buried in South Africa. The forces held an urgent media briefing yesterday at the Gallagher Convention Centre in Midrand. The briefing addressed the concerning circumstances surrounding the late former Zambian president, including the details of his stay and death in South Africa, as well as the broader legal and diplomatic implications. The national organizer for Progressive Forces of South Africa, Bonang Sibulwane, explains.
As Progressive Forces of South Africa, we have decided that we will take the responsibility and dig in the issue of why Edgar Lungu family want to bury him in the country. We had a space, I believe, on the 18th of June after the family announced that they are not going to take his remains to Zambia.
Civil society organization the Swaziland Solidarity Network has expressed outrage over the arrival of 5 foreign criminal deportees from the United States in Eswatini. The Eswatini government confirmed that migrants described by U.S. Department of Homeland Security spokesperson as depraved monsters had been sent to its prisons. They had been convicted of crimes including child rape. The organization accused the country's monarchy of personally benefiting from the exchange and called it bizarre. Lucky Lukele is the spokesperson for the Swaziland Solidarity Network.
This is an insult to the territorial integrity of the country. King Mswati does not own Swaziland. It belongs to the people. So we reject this thing with the contempt it deserves. And one thing that has come to light is that this could have been a deal. As you know, that Lesotho and South Africa and other countries were hit with tariffs and threatened to be kicked out of AGOA. This could have been a deal by the king because Swaziland was mysteriously left out of this thing. So these are gangsters that have have sat down and struck a deal, because there is money that Swaziland will receive for these criminals.
Lastly, today is Nelson Mandela International Day. The initiative is a global celebration to honor the life and legacy of the late former South African president. The day is celebrated every year on July the 18th, which is Mandela's birthday. The United Nations had officially declared the day in November 2009. The first UN Mandela Day was held on July the 18th, 2010. The global community will honor the legacy and values of Madiba through volunteering and community service. Channel Africa News, I'm Onelin Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Ruth Cheptegei, the women's world marathon holder, has been provisionally suspended by the Athletics Integrity Unit for ingesting a banned substance. And it's a big day today as the 2024 Women's Africa Cup of Nations quarterfinals start tonight in Morocco. Details coming up at 7:30.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Now, South Africa is moving ahead with plans to launch a high-level judicial inquiry into alleged corruption and criminal collusion at the top levels of its police service. President Cyril Ramaphosa announced the commission this week after a senior provincial police chief, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, publicly accused top-ranking officers, including the National Minister of Police, Senzo Mchunu, of working with criminal networks. The country's Minister of Justice, Mamoloko Kubai, says that logistical arrangements for the inquiry are already in motion. She spoke on Thursday during the graduation of 89 senior officials from the Special Investigating Unit, and that's South Africa's elite anti-corruption body. Sisi Sakhala has the details for us.
South Africans have been at pains since President Ramaphosa announced the establishment of the commission, with many saying the commissions do not bear any fruits. Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development has allayed their fears, saying that the work of the commission has begun in earnest. She indicated that she already met with the commissioners on Monday, immediately after the pronouncement. She assured the public that they have hit the ground running.
Venue has been sourced, staff has been appointed. I've signed some of the memos. I've already made sure that we can be up and running. Protection of the commissioners, we will be able to have to protect them in terms of the work that they've been done. I've signed off the terms of reference yesterday. They are being processed. I'm hoping that together with the commission, establishment of the commission will be gazetted today, latest tomorrow, but latest is tomorrow. The logos are being finalized, so we're dealing with two parallel commission, I must say. So almost all of them, my looking of things is that next week they must be live.
Meanwhile, the head of the Special Investigating Unit, Ndi Mutibi, has urged all South Africans to support the commission, saying it is a semi-judicial process that is going to investigate the allegations made by Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi.
That process, it's a process that's going to determine the veracity, truthfulness, accuracy, and whether they are really, accurate, that anybody needs to be held to account. That is a measure to test the veracity and accuracy of those allegations, and we need to support that. And really, we must applaud the president for having put in place that commission so that anyone who's got the information should go there and testify and present.
89 senior staff members of the Special Investigating Unit went through a senior management development program in order to better their work within the law enforcement institution. Graduates Gift Lehapa and Boysinkila says the qualification has equipped them better to fight crime and corruption.
The SIU is currently developing a unit that will be dealing with innovation. So in terms of innovation, it will assist us as we tackle corruption, because all the processes that we are currently following, one would know that the traditional method of conducting investigation is no longer applicable. We need now to move to the angle of investigating, where we'll be investigating your digital evidence. So in relation to innovation, the course has assisted us to understand that we need not only stick to traditional methods of investigation, but we must be innovative, because similarly, criminals are also innovative when they do their corruption.
What became important about the course is that whatever we do, we should then include agility. We should do things faster, quicker, and be more professional and be efficient, so that we can be able to, in whatever we're investigating as the SIU, we do things smarter. We then don't take too much time in doing our investigation. So we learned a lot of things as to how to cut short the time that we take in doing our investigation, and how to embrace technology, and how to become efficient, and embracing teamwork as well.
Meanwhile, some quarters in the country have called for the whistleblower Mkhwanazi to be protected. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Pretoria, South Africa.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The Kingdom of Eswatini is under fire after it agreed to host 5 foreign deportees from the United States, none of them African. The men from countries including Vietnam, Yemen and Cuba were deported under a controversial U.S. policy of sending migrants to third countries that did not agree to receive them directly. The Eswatini government insists the men pose no threat, but critics have slammed the move as opaque and exploitative. Joining us now is Velaphi Mamba, Treasurer General of the People's United Democratic Movement, or PUDEMO, a political movement that has long challenged the monarchy's policies. Velaphi, thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
Asanda, good morning. I'm very well, and thank you for having us this morning.
Right, so what is your reaction to the Eswatini government's decision to accept these deportees from the U.S.?
Asanda, as a movement, we are very concerned about this egregious development in our country. We want to state it categorically clear that this is a violation of the country's sovereignty by a monarch that has no accountability to its people, but also to the institutions of state. You will recall, Asanda, that the details around these deportations are quite opaque and classified. As the government spokesperson, the acting spokesperson has said, Tabile Mdluli, that these details are not up for public consumption or discussion. And this is a pointer to the very state of democracy in Swaziland that is pointed to as PUDEMO. And we believe that this is emblematic or indicative of the extent to which the monarch in Swaziland can go in selling the very soul of our country merely for its own existence. We want to make it clear, Asanda, that the Tingula regime, as headed by King Mswati III, poses an existential threat, not just to South Africa, but also to the entire Southern Africa region. I want to also add that when you analyze the newspapers in Swaziland this morning, of course, taking into account that literally all publications, all media publications in Swaziland today are owned by the king. None of them are giving the public the kind of content that is required or even reflecting the mood of the population in terms of what has happened. Instead, there is a narrative that is being driven around how the United States has given Eswatini a waiver for the provision of HIV and AIDS critical medicines. You will recall, Asanda, that USAID and other funding from the United States were shut down when President Donald Trump assumed office earlier in January this year. Now, this narrative that we are seeing being propagated seems to suggest that Eswatini must accept to receive these hardened criminals that the United States itself has categorized as people that are extremely dangerous. And we are expected to accept them, even in the context of a country that has got very weak prison institutions, weak intelligence institutions, weak policing institutions, and generally a collapsed public sector across the board. So this is very egregious in our view.
So we've heard that according to the government and in terms of reports that they're saying that this deal followed rigorous risk assessments. So is that still not enough for you to remove the concerns around this being around secrecy and being opaque, this arrangement?
Asanda, last night in another interview, I said that the truth and the government of Eswatini are 1 million kilometers apart. There is no such thing as rigorous risk assessments that have been done by this government. Just yesterday, the International Organization on Migration, which is a United Nations entity, confirmed that there has been no conversation or discussion between itself and the government of Eswatini around the so-called repatriation of these individuals from Eswatini to their countries of origin. So there is nothing, Asanda, that should be taken as truthful from this regime. Look, I want to emphasize that all three arms of government were taken aback by this development. The cabinet clearly didn't know, or at least not all of them knew, that this would happen. Parliament was clueless. The judiciary was also clueless. So this whole thing is shrouded in secrecy. And this is the very modus operandi of this regime, especially also insofar as how it uses national resources. And one of the suspicions that have arisen around this question or this issue is, what is it in actual terms that we are deriving from such an arrangement? Bearing in mind the attitude of the current United States president towards not only Southern African countries, but Africa in general. You'll recall his comments in 2018 that were quite unpalatable in how he categorized this continent. And now he has the audacity to actually bring these hardened criminals to our shores. This is quite tragic and unfortunate, and we want to condemn it in the strongest possible terms, Asanda.
So on
especially
that point,
because
on that point,
yes.
Do you think that this move can be viewed as Eswatini trying to build relations with the U.S., especially at this time where many countries are trying to appease the U.S. on better tariff impositions? What does it mean about the priorities of the Eswatini government?
Well, if there is a way of building relationships, Asanda, it shouldn't be to the detriment of our people. There are ways in which the Eswatini government can build proper relationships, not just with the US, but other governments through trade and through other benefits that can bring value to our people. This is not the correct and appropriate way of building any relationship. The moral outrage that we feel is rightly so, because this arrangement is going to have a big impact on our prison systems. You'll remember, Asanda, that Swaziland has a growing population of political prisoners. And our biggest concern now is how these hardened criminals will interact with these political prisoners. Prisoners like Comrade Thabo Vulindlela Kunene, Comrade Baqede Mabuza, Comrade Mthandeni Dube, and others are languishing in isolation in Mswati's prisons. And this is the same place that we've been told these criminals will also be housed. So you can see that there might be an intention to visit upon those political prisoners a chilling effect that is meant to dissuade political activism across the spectrum of the country. And I want to also add, Asanda, that the public health system in Swaziland has collapsed. And it has collapsed because of the wanton nature in which the king and his government are managing the fiscal purse. And it is not the fault of Emaswati that that situation around the health crisis must now be used in a manner that will result in such arrangements that go against the interests of the country. The collapse of the health system is on account of the king himself. And the spiraling of HIV and AIDS also in the country was on account of a clueless monarch in terms of how to discharge public policy.
Velapi, just finally, because we're running out of time, do you think it matters that these detainees are not of African origin? They're from Yemen, Cuba, Laos, and Vietnam. Would it have been different in terms of how this move is viewed if they were from neighboring African countries?
It doesn't matter where these detainees come from. The key issue, Asanda, is one, the Swazi state doesn't have the capacity to manage any external detainees, whether they are from Africa or not from Africa. We don't have the correct institutions. We don't have the correct expertise. We don't have the necessary protocols. And we are not a country that was actually designed to host these kinds of deadly prisoners. So that question really doesn't arise. What arises is that we have a government that has undertaken to host very dangerous criminals, exposing not only our detainees in our country to them, but also our society at large, because should their countries of origin refuse to take them in, they will have to be released into Swazi society.
And that's thank you so much for your time this morning. We're completely out of it, but thanks for your insights. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Asanda.
Great. Velapi Mamba is Treasurer General of the People's United Democratic Movement, Pudemo, that is in the Kingdom of Eswatini.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Now, France has officially ended its military presence in Senegal after 65 years, marking a significant moment in the reshaping of post-colonial relations between Africa and its former colonizers. Now, the final handover of the Camp Gay in Dakar was carried out under a 2012 military cooperation treaty and the recommendation of a joint commission earlier this year. While the move aligns with the broader calls across West Africa for the removal of foreign troops, Senegal's approach has stood out for its diplomatic tone. President Bassirou Faye, though firm in demanding a troop exit, has stressed continued cooperation with France, unlike military-led governments like Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, which have severed ties a little bit more aggressively. Well, to unpack the symbolism and strategic implications of France's withdrawal from Senegal and what it signals for Africa-Europe relations, we're now joined by Africa analyst Kwezi Mgqibiza. Kwezi, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Peter, and thank you for the opportunity.
So how significant is this military exit from Senegal, both symbolically and strategically?
Well, I think at a symbolic level, Peter, it is very significant. I think after 65 years of independence, Senegal at some stage had to chart its own path, not only in terms of diplomacy, but in terms of security. And the heavy reliance, or at least being party to a sphere of influence of France in West Africa and other parts of the world, is something that had to come to an end. That is it at a symbolic level. It is the full realization, or it steps towards the full realization of the sovereignty of Senegal. But in strategic terms, it also means that the differentiation you make in your intro about how Senegal has handled this matter, which is more diplomatic as opposed to its neighboring countries that have also seen the departure of France of the French military in West Africa also speaks to the fact that governance is actually being pursued at different levels. Whilst military regimes or administrations in the neighboring West African states have actually been more brash, more definitive, almost cutting off ties completely. Senegal has had to take a democratic route, or at least consideration for democratic interest or interest that a democracy would want to espouse in its relationship, both at a diplomatic, economic, and a security level.
I think it was Prime Minister Macmillan in the UK years and years ago who spoke about the winds of change across Africa when countries started getting their independence. Do you get a sense that there's a wind of change in Francophone Africa, and that whilst many might not have moved, because I saw Côte d'Ivoire recently as well, again, they're a little bit more diplomatic, whilst they might not have changed things because of the winds of change, some of these countries are being forced to change that relationship with France?
There is a very serious wind that is blowing across West Africa and Francophone Africa, Peter. I'm just not sure whether it's just a normal wind or a gale wind or it might lead to a hurricane. But the reality of the matter is that geostrategic considerations are forcing some of the external players, including France, to re-evaluate its posture and the manner in which it actually conducts business in that part of the world. The issue for us as Africans, just like the post-independence era, is that we're not fully in control, or we are not canvassing common, almost minimum agenda points of taking advantage or directing this wind towards the destination that we want to get it. I think that the most natural thing would be for the West African states or Francophone states to sit down now and have that meaningful conversation to say that how can we leverage this moment of decoupling or delinking from France at a military level to say we translate it to commercial cooperation amongst ourselves in terms of building the types of military that could ensure collective defense, collective military action, and collective security. I think it's still at an early stage to say whether this wind of change will be used as an opportunity by Africans to direct ourselves to the destination that we have collectively defined as the aspirations of a peaceful, secure, and stable continent. And this will speak to those countries that are decoupling or delinking from France.
Why did France have troops on the ground? One hears of stories of helping fight jihadist militants in the Sahel. But I wonder if it wasn't always about protecting French interests, having French troops on the ground. And if that is the case, what does it mean for France now?
Well, I mean, the reality of the matter is that many of the Francophone countries in West Africa and Central Africa, their economies were directly, I won't say associated, but they were directly linked to France, or at least some would be crude enough to say that France has always been taking advantage of these countries through post-liberation or post-independence agreements that saw their economies almost being subsidiaries of that of France. So France has always found a reason then to protect its interest by making sure that the military would go wherever the economic interests were. So this mutated over time to now say that if there is a threat of extremism in the Sahel and in countries that are Francophone, France would then have a responsibility to step in because this was an extension of its own economic stability. So that has been the reason that has been mutating over the years. Where the economics are, the security would have to be. And with many of these countries taking a different strategic calculus of where do they want to have their economic relations, who do they want to have economic relations with. This then reduces, I think, the motivation to have France as the only military defense partner for them.
And Kwesi, that's where we'll leave it. Always great talking to you. Thanks so much indeed for your insights.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Thank you. That's Africa analyst Kwesi Mgqibiza talking to us about France withdrawing its military presence in Senegal. It's 7:30. Here are your news headlines with Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. The Umkhonto weSizwe party in South Africa will march to the union buildings this morning. The party's deputy president, John Hlophe, will lead the total shutdown march, whose aim is to demonstrate the MK party's support for KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. France has handed over control of its last major military facility in Senegal, marking the end of its armed forces' long presence in the West African country. And Britain's longest-serving female MP, Diane Abbott, has been suspended from the governing Labour Party for a second time because of comments about racism. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of sports. Here's Musibudi Makura with the details.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Very good morning once again from the sports day. So after a group stage containing about 45 goals and top spots for big hitters like Nigeria, Morocco as well as South Africa, the quarterfinals of the 2024 Women's Africa Cup of Nations tournament officially get underway tonight. No team won all of the three first matches, although Zambia as well as Algeria joined the group winners in remaining undefeated, while Ghana also progressed as runner-ups despite losing their opener against South Africa. Mali as well as Senegal advanced to as the two best third-placed sides and are now seeking significant upsets, and the reward is a place in the final four. So first up is Nigeria up against Zambia tonight. 6 p.m. Central African time is kickoff time for this first quarter-final match. We'll get to see, of course, the 9-time African champions Nigeria have never failed to reach a WAFCON semi-final, but coach Justine Magudu says goals are a concern after scoring once since their opening game. Zambia, on the other hand, scored 7 goals and conceded 4 on their way to matching Nigeria's tally of 7 points, with strikers Barbara Banda as well as Rachel Kudunanchi notching 3 goals each. In the second semi-final, we'll get to see the host nation. The second quarterfinal, we'll get to see the host nation Morocco up against Mali. And of course, a reminder is that a place in the semi-finals are up for grabs later on tonight. Rugby World Cup holders, the Springboks, are in the low fount, having caused a stir in World Rugby yet again after their innovative performance in the second test against Italy last weekend. So both Gwacha Smith as well as Kurtley Arendse have cautioned against underestimating their opponents. Georgia this coming Saturday, that's of course tomorrow. The pair maintain that the Boks' creativity stems from a win at all cost mentality and not because they think less of their opposition. There are also locks playing as loose forwards and loose playing as locks, with Gwacha Smith, who could potentially play 3 different positions. Smith also says that while players can cut their teeth in new roles against the likes of Georgia, it is also at the alignment camps where they plan how to cover their bases.
I think for us, as players that's filling more than one role, more than one position, filling 3 positions in a game, it's not almost in that week where you get the preparation, it's almost in the camps. When we have camps before we start going into test weeks where you get that preparation, and that's really important because when you go into test week you want to focus on your main position. Say if it's, for me instance, it's maybe 6 and 8 or whatever, I want to focus on that, but then I've done the work to maybe cover wing in the camps.
On to athletics news now. Ruth Cheptegei, the women's marathon world record holder, has been provisionally suspended by the Athletics Integrity Unit for a banned substance. Now, the diuretic hydrochlorothiazide, which is also known as HCTZ, was detected in a sample collected from the Kenyan. So on the 14th of March, that's when that sample was taken. That's according to a statement from the Athletics Integrity Unit. They confirmed the news yesterday. So the 30-year-old broke the world record to win the Chicago Marathon back in October of 2024, clocking a time of 2 hours, 9 minutes and 56 seconds. HCTZ is used clinically to treat fluid retention as well as hypertension and is a prohibited substance at all times under the World Anti-Doping Agency Code. The Kenyan's time in Chicago surpassed Ethiopian's Tisget Asafa's previous world record set back at the 2023 Berlin Marathon by nearly 2 minutes. Now, Kipchirchir, who was not provisionally suspended by the AIU at the time of notification on the 16th of April. However, on the 19th of April, she opted for a voluntary provisional suspension while the AIU's investigation was ongoing. Further afield now, Wolves have inducted former forward Diogo Jota into the Hall of Fame in a tribute that honours both his remarkable achievements for the club as well as the deep impact his passing has had on the footballing world. The Portugal international, as well as his 25-year-old brother Andre Silva, who was also a footballer, died in a car crash on the 3rd of July in the Spanish province of Zamora. Jota moved to Wolves from Atletico Madrid in July of 2017 in a deal which was initially on a season-long loan and then made a permanent move before going on to join Liverpool in 2020. He scored 44 goals in 131 appearances for Wolves and was also a key player when they won the championship title in the 2017-2019 season to earn promotion into the Premier League. Jota also helped the Midlands club qualify for the Europa League with a 7th place finish during their first ever season back in top flight football. And finally, Ons Jabeur is taking a step back from tennis for her own well-being. The WTA announcing this on Thursday that the Tunisian has withdrawn from the forthcoming Montreal Open and also added that the 30-year-old will also not play in the 4th Grand Slam tournament of the year. That's, of course, the US Open when it starts next month. Jabeur has been as high as the world number 2 in the world rankings but has now dropped to 71st in the world. A two-time Wimbledon runner-up, she retired from the first round match at the All England Club earlier on last month because she had struggled, of course, on the tournament's hottest day, the hottest opening day where the conditions had reached about 36 degrees Celsius. It's a wrap from the Sports Desk at this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibu D. Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go.
Time now for us to take a look at the world of business, commerce and industry. And at the business desk this morning, good morning to Buntle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Peter. Good morning and a very good morning to our listeners. In our top story at this hour, the world's oldest multilateral climate fund, the Global Environment Facility, is planning a new wave of wildlife conservation bonds in a bid to help African countries save endangered species and ecosystems. Wildlife bonds, which provide low-cost funding in return for cutting poaching or other measures, were pioneered in 2022 with a World Bank-backed Rhino Bond. Head of Programming at GEF, Fred Boltz, says the fund aims to do these bonds for every one of the 54 countries in Africa. He said this move would require an investment of $150 million from GEF, which would then be leveraged 10 times to provide a total of $1.5 billion for conservation efforts through other borrowing. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has confirmed that he received a letter from US President Donald Trump informing him about the decision to impose the 30% tariffs on South African products exported to the US. The tariff hikes are expected to come to effect next month. The president has revealed This during the tabling of the budget vote of the presidency yesterday in Parliament. Ramaphosa has conceded that the US decision is going to significantly impact South Africa's economy in exported products. He says the impact is already being felt by some of the companies, with their export volumes starting to decline.
Last week, we received notification in a letter from President Trump to myself that exports from South Africa to the United States will attract tariffs of up to 30% from the 1st of August 2025. This could have a substantial impact on the products that we export to the United States. We have already seen how just the mere news of the intention to impose tariffs has dampened the ability of a number of exporters from our country to the United States, and we've seen how some companies have had their exports declining by up to 80%.
Financial services group Old Mutual says it sees some opportunities for South Africa despite the somewhat bleak outlook for global economic growth and inflation. The group hosted a mid-year economic update webinar focusing on the impact of potential US tariffs, the Government of National Unity and South Africa's G20 presidency. Domestically, the focus was the GNU, which political analyst Prince Mashele described as a grouping of political enemies pulling in different directions. Mashele suggests that individual employees of the ANC have intensified looting as they sense the party's gradual decline and an inevitable exit.
So the whole saga of Senzo Mchunu working with criminals is about politicians of the ANC working with criminals to steal money from the state. So that is the bigger picture. To summarize,
Ghana's central bank convened an emergency meeting of its Monetary Policy Committee yesterday to assess recent economic developments. The Bank of Ghana's fourth rate-setting MPC meeting for the year had initially been scheduled to start on the 28th of July, with the rate decision expected on the 30th of July. The Bank of Ghana last held a scheduled MPC meeting in May, where it opted to maintain the policy rate at 28%, maintaining its tight monetary policy as inflationary pressures continue to ease due to exchange rate stability and fiscal consolidation. The outcome of the meeting, including any policy decisions, will be announced today. Moving further afield, the board of Meta have agreed to settle a lawsuit brought by shareholders who accuse directors of costing the tech firm billions of dollars by failing to prevent alleged privacy violations. The BBC's Lily Jamali has the details.
We have been able to confirm the settlement, but we don't know the amount and the details are pretty sparse at this point. I do want to be clear about one thing, though, that it was not Meta, the company, that is settling. They're not a direct party to this suit. What was really interesting about this case is that these shareholders suing were going after individuals in their personal capacity, personal liability for people like Mark Zuckerberg and past and current members of the board of directors.
And now for a look at our indicators, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,528 naira this morning. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 29. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 40. And in Zambia, it's 23 kwacha 14. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 56. Russia, 78 rubles 11. India, it's 85 rupees 99. China, 7 yuan 17, and South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 85 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,336 per ounce, little change from yesterday, and platinum at $1,461 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $69.51 a barrel. And those are your business news. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Hetbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. From Cape Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
7:45 Central African time it is. You're still with Africa Rise and Shine On Channel Africa, South Africa's Reserve Bank Governor, Lesetja Kganyago, says even though inflation has eased across G20 countries, it remains above desired levels. His comments come as concerns remain high about inflation rising in the latter part of the year because of the U.S. trade tariffs that have caused uncertainty in global trade. He was speaking at the third Finance Ministers and Central Bankers meeting taking place on the outskirts of Durban, KwaZulu-Natal province in South Africa. Dimakatso Leshoro has filed this report.
It's a tricky time for decision makers in the financial industry gathering here in Zimbabwe on the outskirts of the coastal city of Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. As the third and final meeting of finance ministers and central bankers gets underway, the elephant in the room is the loud absence of high-level representatives from the world's leading economy and whether the leader of the free world will actually attend these talks come November. That's not the end of the uncertainty, but Donald Trump's tariffs that have turned global trade upside down, and even worse is the impact that this may have on inflation and global economic growth. Lesetja Kganyago, South Africa's central bank governor, says making monetary policy decisions in this environment is a challenge.
That in itself makes it a complex task in framing up the policy responses that you would have to take. There are a number of difficulties in assessing the impact, and we are not the only one. Even the US Fed, they found that they struggle to assess the impact of the tariffs on the US economy. So in our analysis, we first have to understand the impact of the tariffs on the US economy, what it would mean for output growth and what it would mean for inflation, because then it determines what the monetary policy stance in the US would be, and then what the global financial conditions would look like. It affects the cost of capital across.
Kganyago says increased government borrowing is driving high deficits and fiscal pressures.
Bank for International Settlements analysis shows that credit growth is now driven more by lending to governments than to private sector, reflecting persistently high deficits and fiscal pressures. This evolving landscape raises the stakes on the interaction between fiscal and monetary policy, especially in avoiding fiscal dominance and maintaining financial stability.
South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says uncertainty continues to weigh on growth, adding to the vulnerability of many African economies.
While the continent is rich in opportunity, it continues to face significant challenges, ranging from infrastructure deficit and climate vulnerability to constrained fiscal space and limited access to long-term private capital. In this context, the Combat with Africa initiative remains a promising platform for fostering reform-driven investment partnership between African countries and the private sector.
Another issue under discussion is how best to ensure natural catastrophes. Kganyago says this is both urgent and consequential for both developed and emerging market economies, as the frequency and intensity of natural disasters continues to grow, causing significant damage to property and infrastructure.
From a central banking perspective and financial stability perspective, this is not a peripheral issue, but a core issue. Uninsured losses from natural disasters can undermine economic stability, threaten the solvency of financial institutions, and disrupt credit flows. Moreover, when governments must step in with emergency funds or debt finance reconstruction, it places additional strain on already limited fiscal space. Bridging this protection gap is part of building macro-financial resilience.
For Channel Africa News in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, I'm Dimakatso Leshoro.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Now, a new survey out of South Africa paints a troubling picture of household finances in one of Africa's largest economies as the country marks National Savings Week. Savings Month, this July. The Credit Utilization Survey 2025 by payday lender Wonga reveals that a growing number of South Africans are relying on borrowing not to grow wealth but simply to survive. The findings reflect a deeper crisis facing low and middle income earners, many of whom are excluded from formal credit systems and forced to turn to costly informal lenders. With over 12,000 respondents across income levels, the report offers valuable insights into the financial pressures confronting ordinary people, issues that echo across many African countries grappling with rising costs of living and limited access to inclusive financial services. Tutung Gobeni has more.
Payday cash loan credit provider Wonga says its latest credit utilization survey 2025 indicates that South Africans are borrowing to make ends meet, as it highlights that out of the 12,000 participants in the survey, 73% of credit users have no saving or emergency buffer. This further highlights the lack of a savings culture, with research showing that South Africans value saving but can't afford to do it. Furthermore, 88.5% of the respondents surveyed are currently using credit. Tina Manyanya, spokesperson for Wonga, says they surveyed participants from the lowest to the highest earning income groups.
We conducted a digital survey in June 2025 to better understand how South Africans are using credit and what drives their borrowing decisions. The survey received over 12,000 responses across 9 provinces, cutting across gender, age, and income groups. 60% of our respondents were female and 40% were male. We saw a wide range of incomes, from those earning less than 3,000 Rand a month to those earning over 100,000 Rand per month. The survey provides a true picture of financial behavior, why people borrow, whether it's for emergencies, day-to-day expenses, or developmental reasons like housing, education, and small business funding. Only 5% of respondents said informal lenders were their preferred credit option, but in reality, 15% had used a mashonisa in the past 12 months.
Mashonisa, or informal lenders in South Africa, have been accused of preying at the desperation of their customers by charging exorbitant interests, who usually turn to them as the last resort, as they do not meet the requirements to obtain credit from banks. Manyanya says low-income earners are mostly victims of this informal lending practice, with those surveyed indicating that the repayments were expensive for them.
Informal lenders are unregulated, often charging interest as high as 50% every month. 23% of respondents who used informal credit said it was their most expensive monthly repayment, leaving less money for essentials or investments in education, housing, or business. The rise of informal lenders is a symptom of access. 65% of respondents said they'd been declined for formal credit, with most rejections happening in low-income groups. Around 15 million low-income South Africans are underserved by formal credit markets.
Many low and middle income earners in South Africa are often stuck with no options of formal credit, as their income is deemed too low to qualify for large purchases such as homes and cars. Manyaka says the challenge is the country's credit regulation system, which doesn't speak to the realities of the country.
South Africa's credit regulation is world-class and designed for developed markets, but financial inclusion lags behind for low and middle income groups. The sections of the National Credit Act dealing with developmental credit are underdeveloped, with bureaucratic processes stifling access for those who need it most. Lenders and regulators must work together to draft a dedicated developmental credit framework that reflects the realities on the ground. Additionally, they must simplify affordability rules responsibly to include low-income earners without compromising consumer protection.
She has called on policymakers to craft an inclusive credit framework and also points to the significance of financial education.
Lastly, they must improve financial education. As we saw with 6% of our respondents who said they didn't know the difference between formal and informal lenders. Better education and access to affordable, safe developmental credit products could transform how people borrow and help unlock real economic mobility.
For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongobeni in Johannesburg.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
An organization promoting social justice and economic empowerment in South Africa, Progressive Forces, say that there are still questions surrounding the death of former Zambian President Edgar Lungu in Johannesburg last month. Speaking at a media briefing in Johannesburg, its president, Mteto Ngcukaitobi, accused the South African government of silence, secrecy, and failing to follow proper diplomatic and legal protocols. Lungu's burial has since been halted. Michael Mbewe has more.
The media briefing comes after Edgar Lungu's family decision to bury the former Zambian head of state in South African soil in private burial was halted by a South African court, which ruling is expected on the 4th of August 2025. His family is rejecting plans for a state funeral to be held in Zambia due to his long-lasting feud with the country's current leader, Hakainde Hichilema. In his remarks, Progressive Forces of South Africa President Mteto Ngcukaitobi made some damning revelations over the mysterious circumstances on Lungu's death.
It has now come to light to us that the former president Edgar Lungu was allegedly admitted into a Pretoria hospital under a false name. That forces us to ask critical questions on our own government. Who did South African authorities officially declare dead? This is not a trivial question. When a former head of state dies on South African soil, there are protocols and diplomatic guidelines, national population register processes. But in this case, it seems none of these steps were properly followed. Instead, we are left with secrecy, irregularities, and now the risk of diplomatic crisis unfolding on our watch. Why is our government so silent on this?
Ngcukaitobi says the matter is a concern to Zambians, while reminding people that members of Lungu's family are facing serious corruption allegations and the amassing of wealth through illegal means.
Let us also not forget why this matter is so sensitive for the people of Zambia. The former First family and their associates are currently facing serious corruption charges back home. These are not allegations of petty theft. This is about state capture, asset looting, the plundering of Zambian national wealth, and accountability cannot be denied. Let us also not forget that this network is believed to be connected to concealed luxury properties abroad, including luxury beach resorts in undisclosed countries. And Ndoro launch in Lusaka now also a subject of asset seizure investigations. And yes, there are whispers that initial Mapupane mine sales beneficiaries are here in South Africa, living comfortably, while ordinary citizens in Zambia are struggling to make ends meet.
His remarks also put a spotlight on broader concerns about South Africa becoming a safe haven for foreign elites facing corruption charges at home, while ordinary citizens both in Zambia and South Africa bear the cost of impunity.
Why was South Africa became the preferred destination for political elites fleeing justice from their home countries? Why was Edgar Lungu not flagged in the National Population Registry when his days was expired in April? Who is our government protecting, and what cost to our sovereignty? We are not here to attack individuals. We are here to defend the integrity of regional justice, the dignity of our people of Zambia, and the rights of our ordinary South African citizens who bear the cost of political impunity. We want transparency and accountability, and we demand that the former President Lungu be returned to his people for a dignified burial in Zambia, not hidden away in shadows of diplomacy.
Yeah, that was the president of the Progressive Forces, Mteto Ngcukaitobi, in discussions with Channel Africa's Michael Mbewe.
It's 8 o'clock Central Africa time. Thanks so much indeed for joining us for this, the third and final hour of Rise and Shine, right here on Channel Africa, where we bring you the African perspective, streaming always on www.channelafrica.co.za. And you can also catch us on your mobile apps. Just look for SABC Plus. I'm Peter Ndoro.
My name is Asanda Beda. Thank you so much for staying with Channel Africa and making us your choice for informing you on news in and around our continent. This hour, we look at Nigeria's Federal High Court having declared that the 6-month suspension of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan is unconstitutional, excessive, and a violation of the senator's constituents' rights to representation. Let's get our news first, though. Here's Onele Nsinzi, and then Musubudi Makura will follow with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Umkhonto weSizwe Party in South Africa will march to the Union Buildings in Pretoria this morning. The party's Deputy President John Hlophe will lead the total shutdown march, whose aim is to demonstrate the MK Party's support for the KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. This follows Mkhwanazi's allegations that senior police officials, including the Minister, Senzo Mchunu, are corrupt and have links to criminal syndicates. The march is the second the MK Party is embarking on in the Gauteng province this week as it intensifies its support for Mkhwanazi. Sibahle Mota reports.
Umkhonto weSizwe Party says this morning's march will form part of a series of events that the MKP in Gauteng will embark on. The MKP says today's march is part of its revolutionary duty to save South Africa. The party's position follows explosive revelations made by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, who claims that Police Minister Senzo Mchunu is associated with notorious criminals who have infiltrated law enforcement agencies. The MKP says these claims support the party's long-held belief that the ANC of Ramaphosa is not only serving its white masters, but its criminal friends at the expense of citizens.
France has handed over control of its last major military facility in Senegal, marking the end of its armed forces' long presence in the West African country and a milestone in the withdrawal from the wider region. The commander of French forces in Africa, General Pascalina, handed over a key to the military camp in Dakar during a ceremony at which a Senegalese flag was raised. Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye announced last year that France's military bases were incompatible with Senegalese sovereignty and would have to be transferred. The two countries agreed to complete that process by the end of the year. Civil society organization the Swaziland Solidarity Network has expressed outrage over the arrival of 5 foreign criminal deportees from the United States in Eswatini. The Eswatini government confirmed that migrants, described by U.S. Department of Homeland Security spokesperson as depraved monsters, had been sent to its prisons. They had been convicted of crimes including child rape. The organization accused the country's monarchy of personally benefiting from the exchange and has called this bizarre. Lucky Lukele is the spokesperson for the Swaziland Solidarity Network.
This is an insult to the territorial integrity of the country. King Mswati does not own Swaziland. It belongs to the people. So we reject this thing with the contempt it deserves. And one thing that has come to light is that this could have been a deal. As you know, that Lesotho and South Africa and other countries were hit with tariffs and threatened to be kicked out of AGOA. This could have been a deal by the king because Swaziland was mysteriously left out of this thing. So these are gangsters that have sat down and struck a deal because there is money that Swaziland will receive for these criminals.
The Nelson Mandela Foundation in South Africa says the government's failure to deliver basic services is a betrayal to the Madiba legacy. On International Mandela Day today, the foundation has highlighted South Africa's challenges, which it says are jeopardizing its development and stability. They range from widespread corruption to high unemployment, deteriorating infrastructure, and crime. The foundation has called on citizens, organizations, and the international community to champion justice on this Mandela Day. The foundation's Professor Vernie Harris explains.
Madiba's legacy is being betrayed by terrible failures of leadership, failures of service delivery. And so for us, Mandela Day is a small part of a much bigger strategy to contribute to realizing the country of his dreams, but we're doing certain things globally as well. think many of the challenges that South Africans think are uniquely South African are actually global challenges.
Lastly, Britain's longest-serving female MP, Diane Abbott, has been suspended from the governing Labour Party for a second time because of comments about racism. 2 years ago, Abbott had said that Jewish, Irish and traveller people did not experience the same type of racism as black people because the latter was about skin colour. The BBC's Helen Kett.
In a statement given to BBC Newsnight, Ms Abbott said her comments in the interview were factually correct, as any fair-minded person would accept. She said it was obvious that the leadership wanted her out. The party had earlier indicated it would not comment while an investigation was ongoing. Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, said Ms Abbott's remarks were a real challenge because she'd initially suggested they were an error, but was now doubling down and saying she didn't mean that. She meant what she originally said.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Nigeria will face off with Zambia while Morocco up against Mali in the quarterfinals of the Women's Africa Cup of Nations tournament starting tonight, while the West Indies all-rounder Andre Russell set to retire from international cricket. Details coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Nigeria's Federal High Court has declared that the 6-month suspension of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan is unconstitutional, excessive, and a violation of the senator's constituents' rights to representation. Akpoti-Uduaghan, representing Kogi Central Senatorial District, was suspended by the Senate in May 2025 after she submitted a petition alleging that she had been sexually harassed by President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio. After dismissing her petition on procedural grounds, the Senate's Ethics Committee recommended Uduaghan's suspension, saying she had brought public opprobrium to the upper chamber of the National Assembly and stressed that the decision was not because of her allegations against Akpabio. The Senate President has approached the Court of Appeal to challenge the Federal High Court judgment, arguing that the Federal High Court lacks jurisdiction to entertain the case. Let's talk now to Ibrahim Wali. We're joined by him over the line, a private attorney with IU Wali Law Firm, who's been monitoring this case and studying the processes and final order in detail. Ibrahim, thank you for joining us. How are you on this Friday?
I'm very fine, thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope I'm audible enough.
Yes, you are, and thanks for making time for us. What do you make of the Senate's reaction to the judgment, insisting that the court gave no binding order mandating Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan be reinstated?
Well, been seized with the disposition of the Senate even before this matter began, and obviously throughout the proceedings and everything that led to the proceedings. I anticipated this type of defiance even from the day that the court gave the order. I anticipated that the Senate would try. I believe that what we have now is just the order, not the complete ruling of the court. And if you look at the preamble to the order, it is clear that it is meant to be binding because it begins with the phrase, it is hereby ordered. It is hereby ordered. And then the court now went on to give about 12 distinct orders. Now, I have to concede that the court could have been a lot more clear. It could have been a lot more final and a lot more direct in its wordings, and the court erred in that regard. But all the same, in the spirit of constitutionalism and the pristine understanding and following of the rule of law, and especially if you respect the court, looking at the constitutional provisions that mandates, even the decisions of the court, opinions, judgments, and even recommendations, as binding. And these are issues that the Supreme Court has since settled, in terms of how to interpret court judgments. But if you look at the judgment, you'd see that the language differs in two ways. When the court was speaking about the contempt of the senator who was the applicant, Senator Natasha herself, the court made it clear that she should pay, or rather she will pay, or she must pay 5 million naira fine for her contempt, even though the court before then mentioned that it's only going to focus on the originating summons, the preliminary objections, and the motion or notice, that is the interlocutory application. But the court went ahead to give a decision on the application of the respondents that she was in contempt of court. But I think it will interest you to know that the court had earlier officially on a recent order, or rather before the matter was transferred to this particular court, the previous court had earlier held the Senate in contempt of its own direct order, because it had earlier given an order even before the suspension for all actions regarding the Senate committee, based on the subject matter should stop. But the Senate went ahead and suspended her all the same, regardless of the order. So the applicants made an application for contempt, but the court didn't entertain the application for contempt, even though the abuse was more direct compared to what the senator did. But all the same, the Constitution is clear as to the weight of the decisions of the court, and this is the order of the court. This is not the complete ruling where you can make the argument that maybe it's an obiter dictum, that is, maybe it's a suggestion of the court, maybe it's opinionated. It's supposed to be an order, and it reads order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it begins with "it is hereby ordered." But indeed, the language of the court was that the Senate has the power, and the Senate should recall Senator Natasha. It would have been a lot more clearer, a lot more firmer if the court had said that the Senate must, or rather, the senator shall resume her duties immediately. But it is important to know that preceding all those orders, the court held that indeed the suspension was excessive. And it was unconstitutional because it disallowed her to perform her constitutional functions as a parliamentarian. So it is known to law, and I think even year one law students know that immediately a decision is held to be unconstitutional, and it is void ab initio. You don't need the court to come and expressly say that, okay, the decision is void. It helps if the court goes ahead to do that, but you do not need it. So the Senate is just being clever by half, and obviously, the court allowed it a little bit of opening, at least something that allows you to file a notice of appeal. And naturally, when you file a notice of appeal, then there's that presumed stay of execution of the judgment, and obviously that this is the position of the Senate, that they have an appeal and the judgment is merely advisory, and we need the Court of Appeal to come in and interpret it and make it clearer one way or the other. And but I feel like, if they were going to respect the rule of law and respect the judiciary and, be statesmen as we expect them to be, it wouldn't have been an issue. They would have understood that the disposition of the court is that their action was excessive and unconstitutional, and therefore it ought to be reversed. So that is my own understanding of it.
Yeah. What procedure then was Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan supposed to follow when it comes to these accusations of sexual harassment? And as you see it, where did she default?
Well, first of all, this particular judgment stems from an application, via an originator interpreting the action of the Senate, changing her seat, refusing her to speak in the Senate, directing her to the Ethics Committee, and the subsequent suspension. It has nothing to do with her own allegations or her own petitions against the Senate President, the petitions against sexual harassment. That has to do with her role as a senator and the change in her seat, and the purported suspension and the trials itself. But I think that she has a separate suit against the senator, that is based on the sexual allegation. I'm sure she also has a petition. She also had a petition against him at the Senate that was based on sexual allegation, abuse of power, and similar claims. But obviously, the Senate committee, used some sort of technicalities, including the fact that the matter is in court, to step that aside, and that has not been resolved. So we've not had any resolution whatsoever, either by the Senate or the courts. regarding the sexual allegations itself. But obviously, the sexual allegations can only be proven in court, and I'm sure she's in court. That matter is ongoing, so it's unconnected to the judgment that was delivered last week. So as far as the allegation is concerned, it's still yet to be decided. I think that the contempt, the particular contempt that the court held in breach of it has to do with a post that she put out on social media. I think it was a metaphorical post. I think where she was sort of apologizing to the Senate and the Senate president, but it wasn't really an apology. It was just it was veiled some sort of I wouldn't say condescension, because I didn't think it was condescending, but then obviously we've not read the complete ruling, so we don't even know what the reasoning of the court is. And it's unfortunate because it's been 1 week since the judgment is out and we're yet to get the complete ruling so that we can follow the reasoning, the thought of the court, and maybe the judgment would make more sense to us. So yes, that's the position we found ourselves in currently.
So the Senate President argues that the federal court lacks jurisdiction on the matter, as you touched on. Does the Federal High Court lack jurisdiction to entertain this case?
To be frank, this argument has it predates even this case, but the Federal High Court, even in this same order, held that the preliminary objection where its jurisdiction has been challenged, it succeeds in part and fails in part. In their argument, and I think that this is her reason, and it succeeds, where it has to do with, constitutional infringement of her rights, rights of representation, and so forth. But the court also, I want to believe, claims that, she doesn't have the right to challenge the internal democracy or the internal proceeding of the parliament, right? So the argument of the Senate is that when it comes to the internal proceedings of the Senate or of the National Assembly, then the court has no jurisdiction because, it feeds into the doctrine of the democracy, separation of power. But I disagree with that. I think that as long as a decision can be found to have infringed the Constitution and the decision is not backed by an express law, and I think that the court indeed has the power, has the right to come in and try to rectify that decision. So I believe that the Court of Appeal is going to make a more resolute decision, on either way, because currently, if you look at our, judicial archives, you would find that it's leaning more towards the court not having jurisdiction, but we don't believe that is a sound jurisprudence. We believe that as long as you can establish that breach against the Constitution or against the law that gives you a certain power, certain privileges or certain rights, and the court can come in and protect it. Whether there's an actual breach or the breach is in anticipation, then the court should have the right, the power rather, to come in and protect it. But as our jurisprudence is currently, there is no definite position, and in fact it leans towards the court not having jurisdiction when you look at previous matters involving senators and the National Assembly generally, or the Senate, where
from here? What's the next avenue to explore then? Should the Senate President in the Court of Appeal not get a favorable outcome? And also on the side of Senator Akpoti Uduaghan, where does she go from here?
Yeah, both parties have, I'm sure both parties have already filed their appeals at the Court of Appeal, and I'm sure that in a little time, their briefs are going to be sent in. But immediately they are done, then they still have, the right to go to the Supreme Court. And we hope that the Supreme Court, because I believe that they would most likely go to the Supreme Court, because most matters in Nigeria generally, when parties are aggrieved, especially in matters of this nature, it almost always ends up at the Supreme Court. Sometimes it doesn't even end up there. They file another action with, really constructed claims such that, they try to distinguish it with the... But I'm very sure that, if either party does not get a favorable judgment at the Court of Appeal, then they are going to go to the Supreme Court, and I hope that the Supreme Court is going to have a final say. But the problem here is that... all right, no problem.
Let's leave it there for now. Ibrahim, thanks for your time again.
No problem, Miss. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. Ibrahim Wali, a private attorney with the IU Wali law firm, part of is actively involved in terms of monitoring the case and has studied this process of this Nigeria's Federal High Court having declared the 6-month suspension of Senator Natasha Akpoti Uduaghan as unconstitutional, excessive, and a violation of the senator's constituents' rights to representation.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
So we turn away from the legal to the social and political implications of this case. Senator Natasha Akpoti-Addo suspension by the Nigerian Senate in May sparked a wave of outcry, not only over the legality of her removal, but also the deeper message about how women in power are treated. Now, following last week's ruling by Justice Binta Nyako, which declared the suspension unconstitutional and ordered her reinstatement, many are questioning the Senate's response, especially its claim that it cannot act without first reviewing the certified true copy of the judgment. Well, joining us now is Areti Bakare Yusuf, who's a seasoned broadcast journalist, founder of the Purple Women Foundation, and co-convener of the We Are All Natasha protest movement. And she's been one of the most vocal advocates for justice in this case and a tireless campaigner for gender equity in Nigerian politics. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and so good to have a chance to talk to you again.
Good. Is it good morning? Good morning.
Yes, good morning. So
how are you?
We're well, and I suppose that you should be feeling good as well, given the court judgment. But what is your reaction, especially given what the senators decided to do?
Well, because they intend, because I left Nigeria, 24 hours ago. But I do know that the last time they were stopping her from coming from resuming her job. Look, let's talk about the judgment. The substantive judgment, she has won. I mean, the judge did say they were excessive. That's the good thing. We knew it was against the Constitution. That's the other good thing. It's unfortunate that the judge didn't have the courage. She couldn't go far enough as to condemn that action, because it is condemnable. When you break the Constitution, when you disobey the Constitution of the land, it should be condemnable. When you disobey the laws of the Senate itself, the judge should have condemned them, but she didn't. Having said that, we did win. She did say it was excessive. But incidentally, it's so there's so many layers to this, because they've turned it so political. And by that, I mean the campaign to stop Senator Natasha from going back into a role as senator is actually now seemingly their focus. She should be able to return back. They've gotten the CTC, as of the last I checked. They've gotten the CTC. All she needs to do is take the CTC back to the Senate and do whatever paperwork is required and go back to work. But they're trying to stop her from returning to work, which tells you something. Which tells you that this was never about Senator Natasha, not wanting to sit in any chair or anything. It was about actually, it was about debasing this woman and denying her right, her elected right to represent her people. So the people of Kogi State, where she represents, continue to lose, their franchise in our democracy, in the Nigerian democracy, and it's an absolute and utter disgrace. The Senate, which should care fundamentally about the people, that is their job. The Senate president, the only thing that differs him from me is that he has the Constitution on his shoulders. And he's supposed to ensure every single Nigerian citizen has representation. They get their share of the Nigerian democracy. But rather than do that, he's busy playing all these games. It's actually disgraceful. So yes, Senator Natasha has won. We did say this was illegal. You couldn't do this. There were 2 precedents, legal precedents, that told us it was illegal, including, or that informed us that it was illegal, including the Constitution, including the Senate rule book.
Right.
And
All
now
right.
they then go on to, go ahead.
We've got quite a lot that I still want to get through, so I'm going to hurry us up a little bit. To help our viewers and listeners understand, you convened the We Are All Natasha protest, and whilst we're talking about Natasha in particular, this movement really was about the attitudes and the actions against women in general, right?
Absolutely. It was bigger than Natasha. It was bigger than, and it still is. It always will be. It's about Nigerian women in general and their representation in nation building. So, for instance, there's a new documentary called Double Minority. That documentary was made by Kadria Ahmed, a woman. Kadria is a journalist like I am. Kadria in 2023 followed 9 women, 9 female political candidates on their journey, their campaign journey. I promise you, it is one of the most shocking things you will see. The abuse, the physical violence, the mental violence. And Natasha, nobody knew this was going to happen. Senator Natasha was part of the people she followed. Literally, her and her crew just followed 9 women in their political campaigns. Death threats. It's insane. Yeah, so We Are All Natasha campaign is bigger than Senator Natasha. And even Senator Natasha will tell you that. She will tell you that it is bigger than me. This is important for all of us. And that's why I convened it.
All right. So what do you say to those that argue that Senator Akpoti should have used internal mechanisms before going to court, as the Senate insisted?
Do you know those who said that don't know that there is no mechanism for her to use. There isn't. There wasn't any internal mechanism. Let me tell you something. If you remember that when the whole thing started, she had to, she submitted the petition and they said no, she couldn't submit a petition on behalf of herself. Right? So she had to go back, and then one of her constituencies did it for her. That's because it had never been in that situation. Their rule book actually never accounted for a time when a sitting senator would need to actually table a motion about themselves. Are you with me? Yeah. They didn't. So there was no internal. So where is it in the rule book? Does it say if you've been sexually harassed, if you're male or female senator, is sexually abusive? What? There is nothing. So what's internal? What internal mechanism did they want her to use? To kneel down? Good God, no. To do what exactly?
So often in history, there are moments that can shift and change things significantly. Do you think that this Natasha case could be a pivotal moment in mobilization around reshaping the political landscape for women and the attitudes that patriarchy plays in how particularly women and leaders are treated?
Great question. So I'll tell you 2 things. One, right now, there is a debate about creating special, and that's the exact words, special seats for women in the assembly. To some people, that is great. To me, it is not. I do not want you to create special seats for me. I just want you to leave me so we can have an even playing field. So you and I can compete as equals. I don't want special treatment. But that's what's going on right now. The women, in fairness, some say, look, Iriti, That's the best we can get. It's a way forward, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to fault those people. I'm just saying it's not something that I would subscribe to because, and at the end of the day, women are not a monolith, right? There are 300 ways to skin a cat. There's 300 ways for us to get victory as well. That's one. Number two, though, when you talk about the future, I'll tell you what happened. And it was, for me, it was such a powerful moment. And, I didn't know you were going to answer this for me, but I think that for me was what kind of defined and solidified the catalyst of this moment, this Natasha moment. So the documentary that I told you about was premiered in Abuja on Saturday, on Monday, this Monday. Natasha was part of the women, so she was there. When she was leaving, all the young women, the ushers, the this, the that, they all surrounded her. She had become their queen, their hero, if you like, their icon, whatever. And I remember standing back and thinking, oh my word, this is incredible. This is amazing. This next gen, they'd been looking for somebody and they didn't know who. And Natasha is that person for them. So I kind of got the ushers together and said, look, all of you stand behind her. And they all took a picture.
Wow.
And you should have seen the joy in their face.
That's wonderful to hear. Ireti, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. But thank you so much indeed for joining us and telling this story. And I think we need to keep on talking and making sure that attitudes and positions change and bring a better day for women right across the continent. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. That was Ireti Bakare Yusuf, broadcast journalist, founder of the Purple Women Foundation and co-convener of WAN. We Are All Natasha protest in Nigeria. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Burkina Faso military rulers have disbanded the country's electoral commission, calling it a waste of money. The state media has reported that the Interior Ministry will handle elections in the future. Umkhonto Wesizwe party in South Africa will march to the union buildings in Pretoria this morning. The party's deputy president, John Hlophe, will lead the total shutdown march, whose aim is to demonstrate the MKP party's support for KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. And U.S. officials have confirmed that President Donald Trump has been diagnosed with a vein condition. The White House says frequent handshakes and aspirants have bruised his hands. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's check in now with the world of sports with Musubudi Makura, who's got our sports news. And what's happening with the quarterfinals of the 2024 Women's Africa Cup of Nations, Musubudi?
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Good morning once again from the sports days. Well, those quarterfinals are starting officially tonight. That's after the group stages concluded earlier on this week. 45 goals scored in total. Top spot for big hitters Nigeria, Morocco, as well as South Africa. The quarterfinals officially get underway tonight in Morocco. So no team won all of their first three games, although Zambia as well as Algeria joined the group stage winners and remaining undefeated undefeated, while Ghana, on the other hand, also progressed as runner-ups despite losing their opener against South Africa. Mali as well as Senegal advanced as the two best third-placed playoff teams and are now seeking significant upsets now and a reward in the semi-finals of this competition. So up first is Nigeria up against Zambia. That's at 6 p.m. Central African Time. It's 9 African Time champions Nigeria, who have never failed to reach a WAFCON semi-final. But the coach of the side, Justine Madugu, says goals are a concern after scoring once since their opening game. Zambia, on the other hand, went on to score 7 goals and conceded 4 on their way to matching Nigeria's tally of 7 points, with strikers Rachel Kunenanchi as well as Barbara Banda scoring 3 goals each for the WAFCON bronze medalists from 2022. Meanwhile, in the second quarter-final match, the host nation Morocco will face off with Mali. That kickoff is at 9 p.m. Central African Time. A 1-0 victory over Senegal ensured Morocco's path to the final and avoids Nigeria as well as South Africa, while 4-goal captain Ghislaine Chebak, the prize candidate to trouble a Mali side who lost their third match 4-0 to South Africa. The Atlas Lionesses conceded twice in each of their first 2 games against Zambia as well as the Democratic Republic of Congo, while Mali will be hoping that their captain will recover in time as an injury forced her out of that match against Banyana. So the captain will be hoping, of course, to be part and parcel of the team when they face off with Morocco later on tonight. In cricket news now, South Africa's under-19 co-captain Mohamed Bubulia's 72 of 79 deliveries was all but in vain as he watched his side go down by a massive 130 runs to Bangladesh in the first youth ODI match in Benoni in the east of Johannesburg yesterday. Having elected to bowl first, the host side struggled to get rid of Zawad Abra, Rizwan Hussain as well as MD Abdallah as they scored a damaging combined 196 with the bat and ultimately went on to lose that match. Now the captain says although the score was competitive to try and chase, he thought that they could have still recovered from that match.
Yeah, listen, I think it was quite a competitive game of cricket. I think Bangladesh played really well across the game in both innings. I think obviously we got off to a good start with a few early wickets and then a couple of partnerships. I still think our bowlers did an excellent job to bring it back at the back end, the last 14, 15 overs the way we did. And at the break, 280 I think was gettable.
Staying with cricket news, 2-time T20 World Cup winner Andre Russell will retire from international cricket at the age of 37 after the second T20 match against Australia on the 22nd of July in his hometown, Kingston, Jamaica. With the Cricket West Indies having confirmed the news on Wednesday, all-rounder Russell, who won the T20 World Cup in 2012 as well as 2016, has earned 84 international caps in the format, scoring 350s as well as 61 wickets in the process, taking those 61 wickets. Now the wide ball specialist, who played only one test match, also appeared in 56 one-day internationals, taking 70 wickets in that format. He last played in the 50-over format back in 2019. Russell, who travels around the world competing in T20 leagues and most recently appeared in the Major League Cricket in the USA this month, said he wanted to finish his international career on a high. And finally, Wolves have inducted former forward Diogo Jota into the Hall of Fame in a tribute that honours both his remarkable achievements for the club as well as the deep impact his passing had on the footballing world. The Portugal international as well as his 25-year-old brother Andre Silva, who was also a footballer, died in a car crash earlier on this month in the Spanish province of Zamora. Jota moved to Wolves from Atletico Madrid back in July of 2017 in a deal which was initially on a season-long loan and was then made permanent before going to join Liverpool in 2020. He scored 44 goals in 131 appearances for Wolves and was also a key player when they won the Champions title in the 2017-2018 season to earn promotion into top-flight football. Jota also played the Midlands club, or also rather helped the Midlands club to qualify for the Europa League competition with a 7th place finish during their first season back in top-flight football. Well, that is a wrap from the Sports Desk at the Sour. There'll be more sporting updates in the next hour with the On The Move team. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibu D. Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Gender-based violence is destroying lives and tearing communities apart. It happens in homes, in schools, at workplaces, and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. Because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday, 23rd of July for Hard Talk, discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC. We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628.
Royce, let's catch you up one last time on Rise and Shine on what's been happening in business. Good morning, Buntle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Peter. Good morning. In our top business story at this hour, the Cross-Border Traders Association of Malawi says Tanzania's move to introduce a mandatory travel insurance of $44 upon entry is a trade barrier to cross-border traders. This new requirement applies to all international visitors, regardless of the purpose of travel, including tourists and business travelers. Malawi and other COMESA member states have since demanded talks with the government of Tanzania to especially address the issue of small-scale traders who will be impacted by this. The desk officer at the Cross-Border Traders Association of Malawi, Richard Batch, explains.
As you know that we are fighting for the non-tariff barriers, so bringing in another cost that is not unplanned for the business is also a challenge, which also affect most of the small-scale traders as they are traveling and doing their businesses. Hence, there is a need to remove this cost for the small-scale traders so that they should travel freely when they are doing their businesses.
The world's oldest multilateral climate fund, the Global Environment Facility, is planning a new wave of wildlife conservation bonds in a bid to help African countries save endangered species and ecosystems. Wildlife bonds, which provide low-cost funding in return for cutting, poaching or other measures, were pioneered in 2022 with a World Bank-backed Rhino bond. Head of Programming at GEF, Fred Boltz, says the fund aims to do these bonds for every one of the 54 countries in Africa. He said this move would require an investment of $150 million from GEF, which would then be leveraged 10 times to provide a total of $1.5 billion for conservation efforts through other borrowing. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says the South African government generated about $22.4 billion in infrastructure investment last year. He says among other stakeholders involved to achieve this is a private sector. He described this as a milestone in financial injection since 2021.
Last year, the total value of new projects announced by both the public and the private sectors amounted to 454 billion rand, the largest fixed investment in infrastructure in South Africa since 2021.
Nigerian billionaire businessman Aliko Dangote is seeking approval to develop a new seaport in Olokola, Ogun State, located about 100 kilometers from his fertilizer and oil refinery complex in Lagos. The proposed Atlantic seaport would boost export capacity and ease logistics, complementing the on-site jetty he currently uses to ship urea and receive heavy equipment for the refinery. Analysts Progress Palm Springs says the proposed seaport is also strategically positioned and will provide significant economic benefits for Nigeria's economy.
Strategic trade positioning. Located on the Atlantic coast, the port offers access to both West African regional markets and global shipping routes, a major plus for transshipment and regional trade. Then, of course, job creation and economic zones. So this project will likely spur industrial clusters around the port. This includes warehousing, processing plants, export zones, creating thousands of jobs and bolstering Nigeria's non-oil GDP, which is something that is very, very important for Nigeria.
The board of Meta have agreed to settle a lawsuit brought by shareholders who accuse directors of costing the tech firm billions of dollars by failing to prevent alleged privacy violations. The BBC's Lily Jamali has the details.
We have been able to confirm the settlement, but we don't know the amount and the details are pretty sparse at this point. I do want to be clear about one thing, though, that it was not Meta, the company, that is settling. They're not a direct party to this suit. What was really interesting about this case is that these shareholders suing were going after individuals in their personal capacity, personal liability for people like Mark Zuckerberg and past and current members of the board of directors.
And now for a look at our indicator, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,528 naira this morning. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 29. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 40. And in Zambia, it's 23 kwacha 14. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 56. Russia, 78 rubles 11. India, 85 rupees 99. China, 7 yuan 17. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 85 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,336 and platinum at $1,461 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $69.51 a barrel. And those are your business news. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Hetbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Young couples or young people that are getting married, we often hear of divorces, that they're getting divorced, and it's quite worrying because when we attend these weddings, we want to see these people flourish and celebrate 30-year anniversaries. What do you think is the main challenge that is facing newlyweds?
We say that tell me how you were raised and I'll tell you how you love. So when we see people getting married, that's not where the relationship actually starts. The relationship starts with how you were raised, what you were familiar with, because we are attracted to what we are familiar with. If you don't have a background where love was prominent, where love was authentic, it's going to be very difficult for you to manufacture that in later life. So our upbringing has something to do with it.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege.
The South African Broadcasting Corporation, SABC Sport, brings you Chasing the Sun, a powerful 5-part documentary series about the country's national rugby team, the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Starting 13 July at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2, tune in every Sunday for the highs, the heartache, and the heroes that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus anytime, anywhere, no subscription needed. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Time now for one of my favourite moments in the week, and that's a reflection on the arts and culture, and nobody does it better than Nhlanhla Mahlangu, as we welcome you to this week's edition of RT Beat.
Welcome to this week's African RT Beats exclusive to Channel Africa, The African Perspective. I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu. In this week's segment, Breakfast with Mugabe, a play exploring the final years of late former Zimbabwean president, is set to open in Johannesburg, South Africa, and leading voices in fashion, styling, and creative brand building gather to discuss the evolution of fashion. Breakfast with Mugabe, a play exploring the final years of late former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe's rule, opens at the Market Theatre in Johannesburg this evening. The play, directed by Kelvin Ratladi, the 2025 Standard Bank Young Artists for Theatre, is a co-production with the National Arts Festival. It is inspired by reports of former Zimbabwean presidents once privately seeking out the help of a white psychiatrist. The play includes fictional imagining of conversations between the pair as they delve into grief, healing, faith, nationalism, and legacy. Acclaimed South African actor Themba Ndaba portrays Mugabe and Kgontse Ntshegang plays his wife Grace. It is written by distinguished British playwright Fraser Grace. Director Ratladi elaborates.
We are presenting Breakfast with Mugabe, a play about Robert Mugabe, his leadership, his psychology, and a touch on spirituality. I've always been very much interested in memory and what sits in the archive. And when I won the Standard Bank Young Artists for Theatre and having to create a new work, I sat down with myself and looked into what have we not reflected on. And for me was African leaders and spirituality, and how spirituality is more really much of a taboo subject matter when we look into leaders. And I looked into what are the possibilities and who was this man we've considered revered as Robert Mugabe, and also to look into him as a man more than just a headline.
South Africa's leading voices in fashion, styling, and creative brand building gathered in Johannesburg last Thursday for a dynamic and engaging conversation about the culture, business, and future of fashion. The event featured a curated panel consisting of designers, stylists, and creative entrepreneurs, all shaping their insights on what it means to navigate the fashion world today and the evolution of fashion. Ntsika, culture and communication lead at Maxhosa Africa, was one of the panelists. He spoke about how they continue to make the brand a global one.
I think at Maxhosa, we've aptly called ourselves Maxhosa Africa, in the sense that we are now inspired by the continent. And in order to make the African continent appeal to be global, is us taking that inspiration and globalizing it. And I think it's telling true African authentic stories on global platforms. So how we do that, we apply to go to a Paris Fashion Week, tell African stories. We now have a storefront in New York. We're able to tell our authentic African stories, and anywhere we go globally. I think the most important thing, they always say, it's important to get out in order to tell the story. So what we're doing as Brand Maxhosa, we are growing globally and increasing our global footprint in order to be able to tell our authentic African and South African stories.
And how has the world received that?
Because I think we tell it authentically, and we use a muse such as fashion and clothes to tell that. It's been well received because the world has been yearning for Africa, and there's this beautiful statement that says, Africa, your time is now. And we firmly believe that, and that's how we showcase it, and the world sees it and receives it the way we actually intended to, and it's been beautiful to watch.
Let's just talk a bit about counterfeit, how people are tapping into the brand. How are you making sure that your brand stays authentically African?
Well, I won't lie to you, the counterfeit do impact the business on the basis of the fact that it is a culture that's beyond us. It's way before we were around. It'll probably exist and be prevalent after we're around. But how we do that, we evolve our patterns, we evolve our designs, and we try to almost reinvent and recreate new patterns, new identity and designs, and keeping them on a timeline that is short so that they don't get counterfeited easily. But I think with the material, the fiber, the content that we use, people can try and counterfeit certain things, but people can feel that in terms of quality, it's not authentically us, and that's how we're able to tell the true African narrative.
That's it from this week's African RT Beats. Until next Friday for Channel Africa, I am Ndoro Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
In South Africa, a controversial group known as Operation Dudula has once again sparked debate over immigration and public services. The movement, which has gained attention for its anti-immigrant stance, marched to the offices of the South African Human Rights Commission in Johannesburg, accusing the Commission of defending the rights of undocumented foreign nationals whilst neglecting those of South African citizens. Operation Dudula argues that public institutions such as hospitals and clinics are under pressure due to what it describes as a high number of undocumented migrants using these services. The group handed over a formal list of grievances to the Commission demanding action. Nomtsigilelo Mtabela has more on this story.
Operation Dudula claims Chapter 9 institutions and the NGOs are violating South Africans' human rights by protecting undocumented foreign nationals. Dudula President Zandile Tabula says government should not gamble with the country's democracy.
All we are saying is that we want South Africans to be prioritized. Clinics, our people must be serviced with dignity and pride. Foreigners must not go there because they must have their own medical insurance when they come to the country. Schools, we're going to launch a campaign end of December, the first week of January 2026. We're going to be stationed at school and no foreign child will be attending a school in a public school. They can rather take them to private, we don't care, but at public schools, it's going to be reserved for South African children only.
The organization believes foreign nationals should pay for medical services.
We strongly believe that South Africa Human Rights Commission should be for South Africans, but we are seeing the opposite. They're prioritizing foreigners over us South Africans. I mean, we just gave them 2 cases as a starting point. That there are cases that have been reported to them by South Africans, but they do not even respond. But when it comes to foreigners, they are quick to respond.
This parent blames undocumented foreign nationals for his son's drug addiction.
As I speak, I don't have a house. I'm renting a house all foreigner from Maputo. But me as a South African woman, I don't have a house. So please, Ramaphosa, you must step down because you like foreigners than your country, than your South African people.
The organization has given the Human Rights Commission 10 days to respond to their grievances. For SABC News, I'm Nomtsigilelo Mtabela in Johannesburg.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
So coming up after Rise and Shine on Channel Africa is On the Move with Benjamin Mushatama and Palesa Tau. We're going to find out what's coming up on the show as we cross to Benjamin. He's coming live to us from a farm, Orange Farm, a township, or is it an informal settlement in the Johannesburg region of South Africa. So what's coming up today on the show, Benjamin, and what are you doing there for Mandela Day?
Hey, I was hoping to see you here early in the morning. Where are you?
We're in studio.
You guys, you are cheating. You are cheating on Nelson Mandela Day. Peter, you owe me, man.
He doesn't want to answer that one. Maybe on Monday he'll let you know.
All right, we're right here, and the SABC Foundation is with us in partnership with Habitat for Humanity South Africa. We are here to build some homes here. In fact, it's a project that started a few days ago on the 14th of July. There's been building of houses in different provinces. There's 5 homes that were built in Khayelitsha. 2 homes in Joe Slovo community in the Eastern Cape. Here in the Orange Farm, we've got 4 homes that are actually being built. So we are right here in the action. Palesa is wearing overalls. She's ready to get a brick in her hand and get that cement and get going. It's such an important day, Mandela Day, as we commemorate a wonderful man of statesmanship and also a man who actually resembled a sense of humanity and self-sacrifice. So it's a beautiful day out here in Orange Farm. We're definitely looking forward to all the wonderful action during the day. We've also got our other friends in our other services, so it's going to be an all-day action right here in Orange Farm.
We're going to be catching up on those photographs on social media for sure. We want to see what Palesa looks like in overalls.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to feature her there, definitely.
Right. Well, all the best, and do enjoy yourselves there. An amazing initiative that is. It's always great hearing about these kinds of stories, just reminding us of our humanity.
So that's how we come to the end of today's edition of Rise and Shine. It's the end of the week. The weekend starts right now for some of us.
To be up nice and early as its perks. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Asanda, Beda. It's goodbye from us. Let's do this again Monday, 6 till 9. Of course, stay with Channel Africa on the Move is up next. Let's get our news first. Before that, here's Onel Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Looking at your top stories, Burkina Faso military rulers disband the country's electoral commission, and the U.S. President Donald Trump diagnosed with a vein condition. Your latest news, greetings to our listeners. Burkina Faso's military rulers have disbanded the country's electoral commission, calling it a waste of money. The state media has reported that the Interior Ministry will handle elections in the future. Since seizing power in September 2022, the coup leaders have initiated sweeping reforms, including the postponement of elections, which would lead to a return to civilian rule. A nationwide vote was due to last year, but the junta extended the period of transition to democracy until July 2029, allowing leader Captain Ibrahim Traore to remain in power and free to contest the next presidential election. Mkhonto party in South Africa will march to the Union buildings in Pretoria this morning. The party's Deputy President John Hlophe will lead the total shutdown march, which aims to demonstrate the MK party's support of KwaZulu-Natal Commissioner Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. This follows Mkhwanazi's allegations that senior police officials, including Minister Senzo Mchunu, are corrupt and have links to criminal syndicates. The march is the second MK party is embarking on in the Gauteng province this week as it intensifies its support for Mkhwanazi. Sibahle Mota reports.
Umkhonto party says this morning's march will form part of a series of events that the MKP in Gauteng will embark on. The MKP says today's march is part of its revolutionary duty to save South Africa. The party's position follows explosive revelations made by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, who claims that Police Minister Senzo Mchunu is associated with notorious criminals who have infiltrated law enforcement agencies. The MKP says these claims support the party's long-held belief that the ANC of Ramaphosa is not only serving its white masters, but its criminal friends at the expense of citizens.
France handed over control of its last major military facilities in Senegal yesterday, marking the end of its armed forces' long presence in the West African country and a milestone in a withdrawal from the wider region. The commander of French forces in Africa, General Pascalina, handed over a key to the military camp in Dakar during a ceremony at which a Senegalese flag was raised. Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye announced last year that France's military bases were incompatible with Senegalese sovereignty and would have to be transferred. The two countries agreed to complete the process by the end of the year. The Nelson Mandela Foundation in South Africa says government's failure to deliver basic services is a betrayal of the Madiba legacy. On International Mandela Day today, the foundation has highlighted South Africa's challenges, which it says are jeopardizing its development and stability. They range from widespread corruption to high unemployment, deteriorating infrastructure and crime. The foundation has called on citizens, organizations and the international community to champion justice on this Mandela Day. The foundation's Professor Vernie Harris.
Madiba's legacy is being betrayed by terrible failures of leadership, failures of service delivery. And so for us, Mandela Day is a small part of a much bigger strategy to contribute to realizing the country of his dreams, but we're doing certain things globally as well. I think many of the challenges that South Africans think are uniquely South African are actually global challenges.
Lastly, U.S. officials have confirmed that President Donald Trump has been diagnosed with a vein condition. The White House says frequent handshakes and aspirin have bruised his hands. Trump takes aspirin to prevent heart disease. The BBC's Sarah Smith reports.
Recent pictures of Donald Trump showing his legs and ankles looking swollen and very obvious heavy makeup on the back of his hand has prompted all sorts of speculation about his health. So the White House has sought to reassure people that the president is not suffering from any serious condition, saying that he's been diagnosed with chronic venous insufficiency, which his doctor said is a common condition, particularly in individuals over the age of 70. President Trump is 79.
Recapping on your top stories, Burkina Faso's military rulers have disbanded the country's electoral commission, calling it a waste of money. The state media has reported that the Interior Ministry will handle elections in the future. Now, for any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Oneli Tsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is that wonderful day today, a day that we always look forward to here in South Africa. It is Nelson Mandela Day. Can I hear the crowd? Well, we're right here at Orange Farm, and definitely we're going to commemorate the Legends Day. That is the wonderful political stalwart, our first president of the new South Africa, Nelson Mandela. We're collaborating with so many people today under the banner of the SABC Foundation. We've been building houses here, and they've been building houses here.
I'm like, Ben, how many have you built yet? Because I haven't seen, and I don't even let me see your hands. Ben's hands are so